The marriage certificate was still wet with ink when Luca de Lorenzo pressed the gun into Elena Whitmore's trembling hand and whispered, "If they come through that door, you shoot first and ask questions, never." 24 hours ago, she was a waitress drowning in her father's medical bills. Now she wore a stranger's last name, stood in a bulletproof penthouse, and held a weapon she didn't know how to fire. The most dangerous man in the city had just made her his wife. On paper only, he'd promised. But as sirens wailed 15 floors below and his enemies closed in, Elena realized some contracts were signed in blood, not ink. If you want to see how a waitress survives a world built on violence and lies, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Elena's story travels. The fluorescent lights of St. Catherine's Hospital had been Elena Whitmore's entire world for 72 hours straight. She'd watched those lights flicker and hum while doctors delivered increasingly grim updates about her father's condition: massive stroke, extensive brain damage. Even if he survived, the bills were already catastrophic. "Miss Whitmore?" The night nurse's voice cut through her exhausted haze. "There's a gentleman here to see you. Says it's urgent." Elena looked up from the vinyl chair that had become her bed, her spine aching from 3 nights of restless sleep. "I'm not expecting anyone." "He's quite insistent." The nurse's expression held something Elena couldn't quite read. Fear? Respect? "Says his name is Vincent Caruso." The name meant nothing to Elena, but she was too tired to argue. She followed the nurse down the antiseptic hallway, her sneakers squeaking against linoleum that gleamed under those relentless lights. The man waiting in the family consultation room wore a suit that probably cost more than her annual rent. His silver hair was precisely groomed, his posture military straight despite what had to be at least 60 years of living. "Miss Whitmore." He stood when she entered, his movements careful and deliberate. "I apologize for the intrusion during such a difficult time. My name is Vincent Caruso. I work for Mr. Luca de Lorenzo." Elena's blood went cold. Everyone in this city knew that name, even if they pretended not to. Luca de Lorenzo, the King of Shadows, the man who controlled everything from the waterfront to the Diamond District, whose influence reached into City Hall and whose enemies tended to disappear. "I don't know anyone named de Lorenzo," she said, keeping her hand on the door. "And I don't know why someone like that would send someone like you to a hospital at 2 in the morning. Vincent's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes that might have been approval. "Your father borrowed money 18 months ago, $50,000 from an establishment that, at the time, operated independently. 6 months ago, Mr. De Lorenzo acquired that establishment and all its outstanding debts." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Elena's feet. Her father had borrowed money from loan sharks? The same father who'd worked double shifts at the factory, who'd saved every penny to send her to community college, who'd never bought anything he couldn't pay for in cash. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I'm afraid it's quite factual." Vincent withdrew a folder from his briefcase, setting it on the small table between them. "The original loan was taken to cover your mother's cancer treatment. The terms were predatory. The interest has compounded significantly." Elena's hand shook as she opened the folder. The numbers swam before her eyes. 50,000 had become 173,000. Her father's signature, that familiar, careful script, stared up at her from a dozen pages. "He never told me." Her voice cracked. "Mom died anyway. He never said a word about any of this." "Pride makes men do foolish things," Vincent said quietly. "The terms of the loan stipulate that in the event of the borrower's incapacity or death, the debt transfers to next of kin. That would be you, Miss Whitmore." The room felt airless. $173,000. Her father was dying in a hospital room that cost $3,000 a day. She made $11 an hour slinging hash browns at an all-night diner. The math was impossible. The situation was impossible. "I don't have that kind of money." She forced the words past the tightness in her throat. "I don't have any money. I can barely pay my rent." "Mr. De Lorenzo is aware of your situation." Vincent's tone remained professionally neutral, but Elena caught something else beneath it. Sympathy? Regret? "He's prepared to offer you an alternative arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Elena's survival instincts screamed danger, but desperation drowned out the warning bells. Vincent reached into his briefcase again, this time producing a single sheet of paper. "Mr. De Lorenzo requires a wife. For business purposes, you understand. The arrangement would be entirely professional. a contract marriage designed to satisfy certain social and political obligations. In exchange, your father's debt would be erased completely, and all his medical expenses would be covered for as long as necessary. Elena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. You're asking me to marry a crime lord? I'm presenting you with an option, Vincent corrected. The marriage would be legal but purely transactional. Separate residences, separate lives. Your only obligation would be to appear at Mr. De Lorenzo's side at specific public events. The contract would include provisions for your safety, your continued education should you desire it, and a substantial settlement upon the marriage's dissolution. Why me? The question came out sharper than Elena intended. He's rich and powerful. He could have anyone. Why would he want a broke waitress with a dying father? For the first time, Vincent's professional mask cracked slightly. Mr. De Lorenzo believes you possess qualities he requires: discretion, loyalty, and most importantly, motivation. You need what he's offering. That makes you reliable. Elena looked down at the contract, then at the folder documenting her father's crushing debt. Through the thin walls, she could hear the hospital's night sounds. Machines beeping, nurses conferring in hushed tones, the distant cry of someone in pain. Her father was dying. The debt would destroy what little remained of her life. And a stranger was offering her a way out. A devil's bargain, wrapped in legal language and expensive paper stock. I need to think about it, she said. You have until tomorrow at 6 p.m. Vincent stood, straightening his already perfect tie. After that, the debt comes due in full. I'll return then for your answer. He left as quietly as he'd arrived, leaving Elena alone with two folders that represented two impossible futures. She returned to her father's room, to the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator and the glow of monitors tracking his failing systems. Thomas Whitmore had been a good man, a simple man who'd worked hard, loved his family, and made one terrible choice when desperation backed him into a corner. Now his daughter stood in that same corner, staring at the same impossible wall. I don't know what to do, Dad, she whispered, taking his unresponsive hand. Tell me what to do. But her father's silence was absolute, broken only by machines breathing for him. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of consultations with doctors who offered no hope and bills that kept mounting. Elena went through the motions, nodding at medical jargon, signing consent forms, pretending she had any control over what was happening. At 5:45 p.m., Vincent Caruso returned to the hospital, as punctual as death. Have you reached a decision, Miss Whitmore? Elena had spent the day trying to find alternatives. She'd called every bank in the city, applied for loans she knew she'd never qualify for, even considered running, though she had nowhere to go, and the kind of people her father owed money to had long memories and longer reaches. If I do this, she said slowly, I want it in writing that my father receives the best care available. Not just maintenance, actual treatment, real doctors trying to help him, not just waiting for him to die. Done. And I want to know exactly what you mean by public events. I'm not going to be some trophy on his arm at illegal activities. Mr. De Lorenzo keeps his business and personal lives strictly separated, Vincent assured her. The events in question are charity galas, political fundraisers, society weddings, the same functions any prominent businessman attends. Businessman? Elena's laugh was bitter. Is that what we're calling it? That's what he is, among other things. Vincent's expression remained neutral. Do we have an agreement? Elena thought about her father's careful signature on those loan documents. Thought about her mother's slow death despite all the money they'd poured into treatment. Thought about working herself to exhaustion and still drowning. Yes. The word fell between them like a stone into deep water. Excellent. Vincent produced another document, thicker this time, dense with legal language. The marriage will take place tomorrow at City Hall, noon, Mr. De Lorenzo has arranged for a private ceremony. Tomorrow? Elena's voice rose. That's insane. I need time to... Time is the one thing neither of you has, Vincent interrupted gently. Mr. De Lorenzo has enemies who would use any perceived weakness against him. Your father's debt has already attracted attention from individuals who would happily leverage it to cause problems. The marriage needs to happen quickly and quietly. Elena read through the contract with shaking hands. Separate residences. He'd live in the penthouse. She'd have her own wing. Public appearances only as requested. Complete financial support and security. A settlement of $500,000 when the marriage ended, which the contract stipulated would be no less than 2 years. 2 years of her life sold to a stranger. She signed on the dotted line. Oh. The courthouse ceremony was everything a wedding shouldn't be. Cold marble floors, harsh fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly corpse-like. A bored clerk who'd clearly performed this ritual so many times it had lost all meaning. Elena wore the only dress she owned that wasn't a work uniform, a simple navy blue shift she'd bought at a thrift store for her mother's funeral. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking as Vincent led her through security and up to a small room where a judge waited. And then she saw Luca Di Lorenzo for the first time. He stood by the window, silhouetted against the gray afternoon light. Tall, over 6 feet, built like someone who'd learned to fight before he learned to read. His suit was perfectly tailored, charcoal gray that made him look like he'd stepped out of a film noir. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been handsome if it wasn't so carefully expressionless. But it was his eyes that struck Elena silent. Dark eyes that had seen too much, calculated too much, survived too much. They swept over her with the same detached assessment she'd seen in doctors examining her father. Cataloging. Analyzing. Finding her acceptable enough for his purposes. "Miss Whitmore." His voice was deep, rough around the edges, like someone who didn't waste words. "Shall we proceed?" No greeting, no introduction, not even a handshake. The judge began the ceremony, racing through the traditional words with the enthusiasm of someone reading a phone book. Elena barely heard it. She was too focused on the surreal reality of standing next to a complete stranger, promising to honor and cherish someone whose last name she could barely pronounce. "Do you, Elena Marie Whitmore, take this man?" "I do." She cut the judge off, wanting this nightmare finished. "And do you, Luca Antonio Di Lorenzo, take this woman?" "I do." His voice was flat, empty. This meant nothing to him. She was a chess piece he'd moved into position, nothing more. "Then by the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife." No one suggested kissing the bride. Vincent handed over the marriage license. Luca signed it with a flourish that suggested he'd signed 1,000 documents today, and this was merely one more. Elena's signature looked childish next to his, shaky and uncertain. "Congratulations," the judge said without conviction, already reaching for the next file on his desk. And just like that, Elena Whitmore became Elena Di Lorenzo. The penthouse was everything Elena had expected and nothing she was prepared for. 70 floors above the city's chaos, insulated by bulletproof glass and enough security to guard a head of state. The elevator required 3 different key cards to access the private floor. Armed men in expensive suits nodded respectfully as Luca led her inside. The space itself was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city's glittering skyline. Modern furniture that looked uncomfortable and expensive. Art on the walls that Elena recognized from her community college art history course. A Rothko. A Kandinsky. Originals. Probably worth more than her entire life to date. "Your wing is through there." Luca pointed to the left without looking at her. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a sitting room. Vincent will arrange for your belongings to be moved from your apartment. "I don't have many belongings," Elena said quietly. "Then it won't take long." He shrugged out of his suit jacket, draping it over a chair with the carelessness of someone who owned 100 identical ones. "The kitchen is fully stocked. There's a chef on call if you prefer not to cook. Housekeeping comes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday." He was rattling off logistics like she was a new employee receiving orientation. Elena felt something snap inside her chest. "Is that it?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "You drag me into your world, marry me in a ceremony that had all the warmth of a business merger, bring me to this fortress, and now you're just going to ignore me?" Luca finally looked at her directly. Really looked at her. His eyes were harder than obsidian, colder than the marble floors. "What exactly did you expect, Elena?" Her name sounded strange in his mouth, too intimate for someone who'd known her for less than an hour. "This is a transaction. I paid for your father's debt and his medical care. You wear my ring and my name at specific functions. That's the extent of our relationship." "I don't even have a ring," she shot back. Something flickered across his face too quickly to identify. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, tossing it to her with casual indifference. Elena caught it reflexively. Inside was a diamond that could have paid her rent for 5 years. Platinum band, flawless cut, beautiful and utterly impersonal. "There," Luca said. "Now you have a ring. Wear it in public. Do whatever you want with it in private." He started to walk away, heading toward what she assumed was his wing of the penthouse. "Why did you really choose me?" Elena called after him. Luca paused, his back still to her. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. "Because you're nobody," he finally said. "No family connections, no social climbing ambitions, no agenda beyond survival. That makes you safer than anyone else I could have chosen." The words should have stung, should have felt like an insult. Instead, Elena recognized them for what they were, the truth. She was nobody, invisible, forgettable, the kind of person the world looked past without thinking twice. "And because," Luca continued, still not turning around, "Vincent said you argued for your father's treatment before you asked about money for yourself. That suggested a quality I rarely encounter." "What quality?" "Loyalty." He glanced back over his shoulder, and for just a second Elena thought she saw something human flicker in those dark eyes. "Don't make me regret assuming you possess it." Then he disappeared into his wing, leaving Elena alone in a palace that felt like a prison. The first week passed in surreal isolation. Elena wandered her wing of the penthouse like a ghost, touching expensive things she was afraid to break, staring out windows at a city that had never seemed so far away. Luca was gone more often than not. She'd hear him come in late, sometimes 2, 3 in the morning, his footsteps heavy on the marble floors. Sometimes she'd wake to the sound of him showering, the water running for what felt like hours. Sometimes she'd find coffee already made in the morning, a silent acknowledgement that she existed in his space. But they never spoke, never crossed paths. It was like living with a particularly dangerous roommate who'd made it clear the less interaction, the better. Elena visited her father every day. Vincent had arranged for a private room and a team of specialists. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about his stability, though they wouldn't promise miracles. Elena sat by his bed and told him about her new life, leaving out the parts that would break his heart. "I got married, Dad," she whispered, holding his unresponsive hand. "His name is Luca. He's complicated, but he's taking care of you. That's what matters, right?" The ventilator hissed, the monitors beeped. Her father's eyes remained closed. On the 8th night, Elena couldn't sleep. The penthouse felt especially empty, the silence oppressive. She wandered out of her wing, drawn by a sound she couldn't quite identify. Music. She followed it through the main living area to a room she hadn't explored yet. The door was slightly ajar, golden light spilling out into the darkened hallway. Elena peered inside and froze. Luca sat at a grand piano, his fingers moving across the keys with surprising grace. He'd discarded his jacket and tie, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. In the soft lamplight, he looked different, younger, less like a crime lord and more like a man carrying weight that bent his shoulders. The music was haunting, something classical Elena didn't recognize, full of minor chords and unresolved tension. He played with his eyes closed, lost in the melody. Elena must have made a sound because his hands suddenly stilled. His eyes opened, finding her in the doorway with unnerving accuracy. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to intrude. I heard the music and it's 3 in the morning." His voice was rough, tired. "Can't sleep? Can you?" A ghost of something that might have been a smile touched his lips. "Not often." Elena hesitated, then took a small step into the room. "I didn't know you played. There are many things you don't know about me." Luca turned back to the piano, his fingers resting on the keys without pressing them. "That's by design." "The contract didn't mention anything about actually getting to know each other," Elena said. "But we're living in the same space. We're legally married. Don't you think a little conversation might make this arrangement less hostile?" "Hostile." Luca tested the word. "Is that what you think this is?" "I think you've made it very clear you don't want me here except as a prop for your public image." Elena surprised herself with her boldness. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the vulnerable way he'd looked at the piano. "I think you've built walls so high that even you've forgotten why you built them." Luca's hands flexed on the keys, a discordant note echoing through the room. When he looked at her again, his expression was unreadable. "The walls exist for good reason," he said quietly. "You'd do well to remember that." "What are you so afraid of?" The question hung between them, dangerous and presumptuous. Elena expected him to shut down completely, to order her back to her wing with icy dismissal. Instead, Luca stood and crossed to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled below them, millions of lights against the darkness. "You want to know why I chose you?" he asked. "The real reason?" "Yes. Because everyone I've ever allowed close to me has either betrayed me or died." His reflection in the glass was ghostly, insubstantial. Business associates, friends, family, everyone. The moment you matter to someone in my world, you become a target, a weakness to exploit. "So you stay alone," Elena said softly. "I stay alive." Luca turned back to face her. "And so do the few people I choose to protect. Your father is safe because you're nobody to me. The moment you become somebody, his safety becomes negotiable." The logic was brutal but honest. Elena found she appreciated that more than false comfort. "Then I'll stay nobody," she said. "But that doesn't mean we have to be strangers." Luca studied her for a long moment, and Elena had the distinct impression she was being reevaluated, reassessed, measured against some internal standard she couldn't see. "You should go back to bed," he finally said. Elena nodded, recognizing dismissal. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "The music was beautiful," she said. "Whatever was keeping you awake, I hope you find some peace with it." She didn't wait for a response, returning to her wing and her empty bed. But as she drifted toward sleep, she could hear the piano again, softer this time, the melody less haunted. The next morning, Elena found a book on the table in her sitting room. A first edition of Jane Eyre, leather-bound and clearly valuable. No note, no explanation. But when she opened it, she found a bookmark placed at chapter 18. The passage about how women need more than domestic comfort, how they suffer from rigid constraint, how they need action and purpose. Someone had understood her restlessness. Someone had noticed. Elena carried the book with her everywhere for the next 3 days, reading passages during her visits to the hospital, running her fingers over the embossed cover in quiet moments. It felt like the beginning of something she couldn't quite name. On the 4th day, Vincent appeared at her wing with an expression that set every alarm bell ringing. "Mrs. De Lorenzo," he said. She still wasn't used to the name. "Mr. De Lorenzo requires your presence at a function tonight. A charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum. It's time for your first public appearance as his wife." "Tonight?" Elena's mind raced. "I don't have anything to wear to something like that." "Arrangements have been made," Vincent gestured, and 2 women appeared carrying garment bags and makeup cases. "These ladies will help you prepare. The car leaves at 7. The next 3 hours passed in a whirlwind of preparation. The dress was midnight blue silk that flowed like water, cut to make Elena look elegant rather than provocative. The jewelry was subtle, sapphires that complemented the dress without screaming wealth. The stylist transformed her from invisible waitress to presentable wife of a powerful man. Elena barely recognized herself in the mirror. At precisely 7 p.m., she emerged from her wing to find Luca waiting by the elevator. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than a car, his dark hair precisely styled, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes swept over her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You clean up well," he said. "So do you." His lips twitched, almost a smile. "Vincent briefed you on tonight?" "Not really. Just that it's a charity gala, and I'm supposed to look devoted. Look tolerant, that's more believable." Luca offered his arm as the elevator opened. "The key is to stay close, smile when appropriate, and speak as little as possible. These people are sharks. They'll look for any weakness." "What's my story?" Elena asked as they descended toward the lobby. "How did we meet?" "We don't have one. If asked, be vague. Mutual acquaintances, happened quickly, very private people." His hand covered hers on his arm, warm through the fabric. "Follow my lead on everything else." The car was waiting. A black town car with tinted windows and a driver who looked more bodyguard than chauffeur. Luca held the door for her with surprising gallantry, then slid in beside her. As they pulled into traffic, Elena noticed his jaw was tight, his hands clasped in a way that suggested he was bracing for something unpleasant. "You hate these things," she observed. "Necessary evil." Luca stared out the window. "I built my empire in shadows. But shadows require legitimate fronts. Charity galas, political donations, society connections, all the trappings of respectability that make it easier to operate in the dark." So I'm another trapping of respectability. Your insurance. He finally looked at her. There are men at this gala tonight who would happily destroy me if they sensed vulnerability. A wife suggests stability, normalcy. It makes me seem less dangerous. But you are dangerous, Elena said quietly. Extremely. Luca's smile didn't reach his eyes. But tonight, I'm just another wealthy businessman supporting the arts and writing checks for children's hospitals. And you're the beautiful wife who humanizes me. The car pulled up to the museum's imposing entrance. Photographers lined the red carpet, actual paparazzi waiting to capture New York's elite arriving in their finest. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Breathe, Luca murmured, his hand finding the small of her back. You're tougher than you look. You signed a contract with the devil and didn't flinch. You can handle a few cameras. Then the door opened and they stepped into the flashbulbs together. The next 2 hours were surreal. Luca transformed completely, charming, urbane, perfectly calibrated for this world of old money and older secrets. He introduced Elena to senators and CEOs, art collectors and society matrons, his hand never leaving her back or waist. To anyone watching, they looked perfect together, comfortable, connected. Elena played her part, smiling at the right moments, laughing at jokes she didn't find funny, accepting congratulations on her marriage with practiced grace. But she noticed things. The way certain men watched Luca with barely concealed hatred, the whispered conversations that stopped when they approached, the tension that hummed beneath all the polite small talk. And she noticed how Luca watched everyone, not with paranoia, but with the careful attention of someone who'd survived by reading threats in the spaces between words. Mr. De Lorenzo. A man materialized beside them, silver-haired and smiling with teeth that reminded Elena of a shark. What a surprise to see you here. I didn't think charity galas were quite your scene. Senator Hargrove. Luca's tone was perfectly neutral. I could say the same, though I suppose everyone needs their photo opportunities. The senator's smile sharpened. And who is this lovely creature? I hadn't heard you'd taken a wife. We keep our private lives private. Luca's hand tightened fractionally on Elena's waist. Elena, this is Senator Richard Hargrove. Senator, my wife, Elena. Charmed, Hargrove took her hand, holding it a beat too long. His eyes swept over her with an assessment that made her skin crawl. How did you two meet? Through mutual friends, Elena said, remembering Luca's advice to stay vague. How wonderfully mysterious. Hargrove still hadn't released her hand. You know, my dear, marriage to a man like Luca can be complicated. If you ever need someone to talk to. She won't. Luca's voice dropped 20 degrees. If you'll excuse us, Senator. He guided Elena away smoothly, but she felt the tension radiating from him like heat. What was that about? She asked quietly. A warning shot. Luca grabbed 2 champagne flutes from a passing waiter, handing her one. Hargrove is currently under federal investigation for campaign finance violations. He thinks I have information that could make his problems go away or get much worse. Do you? Irrelevant. What matters is that he's desperate, and desperate men do stupid things. Luca scanned the crowd, his expression tight. We need to leave, soon. Why? What's wrong? Call it instinct. His eyes locked onto something across the ballroom. Vincent just signaled. We're moving now. Before Elena could ask what he meant, Luca was guiding her toward a side exit with deceptive casualness. They'd almost reached the door when a woman's voice called out, Leaving so soon, Luca? The night's just beginning. They turned to find a stunning woman in red approaching, tall, blonde, every inch of her screaming wealth and breeding. But it was the malice in her smile that caught Elena's attention. Vivian. Luca's tone could have frozen nitrogen. Didn't expect to see you here. Daddy sits on the museum's board. I go where I'm expected. Vivian's eyes slid to Elena with predatory interest. So this is the wife. How quaint. Elena, this is Vivian Ashford, Luca said flatly. Old acquaintance, very old. Ex-fiancé, Vivian corrected, her smile venomous, before Luca decided legitimate society wasn't quite his style. Elena felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Ex-fiancé. Here was a piece of Luca's past suddenly made flesh. That was a long time ago, Luca said. 3 years. Vivian moved closer, invading their space with deliberate aggression. 3 years since you walked away from everything we could have had. Tell me, does your new wife know what you really are? Does she know where your money comes from? The things you've done? Vivian. The warning in Luca's voice was unmistakable. Or did you just dazzle her with expensive gifts and pretty promises? Vivian's attention fixed on Elena. Sweetie, if you think you can save him or change him, you're even more naive than you look. Something in Elena snapped. Maybe it was the condescension. Maybe it was weeks of being nobody, of being treated like furniture in her own marriage. Maybe it was the protective surge she felt when this woman tried to wound Luca. I'm not trying to save anyone, Elena said calmly. And I'm certainly not naive enough to believe relationships are fairy tales. But I do know that whatever Luca and I have is between us. Not you. Vivian's perfect mask cracked, fury flashing in her eyes. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. Then I'll figure it out as I go. Elena smiled, sharp as broken glass. Now, if you'll excuse us, my husband and I were leaving. She took Luca's arm and walked toward the exit, her heart pounding but her steps steady. Behind them, she could feel Vivian's stare burning into her back. They made it to the car in silence. Only when they were safely inside, the door closed and the engine running, did Luca speak. That was either very brave or very stupid, he said. Probably both. Elena realized she was shaking. Who was she really? Exactly who she said. My ex-fiancé from when I was trying to go legitimate, trying to build something clean. Luca stared straight ahead. It didn't work. Some stains don't wash off. What happened? She found out what I really was, what I'd really built my fortune on. The legitimate businesses were just fronts. She finally understood that. His laugh was bitter. She called off the wedding 3 days before the ceremony, very publicly. Made sure everyone knew she'd discovered I wasn't fit for polite society. I'm sorry, Elena said quietly. Don't be. She did me a favor, taught me that trying to bridge two worlds just means belonging to neither. Luca finally looked at her. Why did you defend me back there? Because she was being cruel, and because... Elena hesitated, then decided on honesty. Because whatever this arrangement is between us, we're supposed to be a team in public. That's the contract. That's what I signed up for. Something shifted in Luca's expression. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of respect. Vincent, he said to the driver, we're not going home. The car changed direction smoothly. Where are we going? Elena asked. Somewhere we can finish this conversation without bulletproof glass between us and the world. They drove for 20 minutes, leaving the glittering city center behind for quieter streets. Finally, the car pulled up to a helipad where a helicopter waited, rotors already beginning to spin. A helicopter? Elena's voice rose. Where exactly are we going? You wanted to actually get to know each other, Luca said, opening the door. Fine, but not in that penthouse. Not surrounded by walls and security and all the things that make me... He trailed off, searching for words. Someone I'm tired of being. He offered his hand. Elena stared at it for a long moment, recognizing the precipice she stood on. She could refuse, could demand to go back to the safe, separate wings and the comfortable distance of their arrangement, or she could take his hand and step into the unknown. She took his hand. The helicopter lifted off into the night, leaving the city's lights behind. Through the window, Elena watched her old life shrink into the distance. The hospital where her father lay sleeping, the diner where she'd spent years invisible, the tiny apartment she'd called home. Beside her, Luca stared into the darkness ahead, his expression unreadable. No more separate wings, he said quietly, so quietly she almost didn't hear him over the rotors. If we're doing this, actually doing this, then we do it honestly. What changed? Elena asked. Luca turned to her, and in his eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected. Exhaustion, loneliness, the weight of carrying too much alone for too long. You stood up for me, he said simply. No one's done that in 3 years. Not since Vivian. Not since I stopped pretending to be anything other than what I am. He reached out, his fingers brushing the sapphire ring on her hand, the ring she'd barely noticed she was still wearing. Maybe I'm tired of that too. The helicopter banked, heading east toward darkness and ocean, toward whatever waited on the other side of honesty. Elena tightened her grip on Luca's hand, feeling his fingers close around hers. The contract had been signed in ink and desperation. But this, whatever this was beginning to become, was being written in something far more dangerous. Trust. The island emerged from the darkness like a secret the ocean had been keeping. Elena pressed her face to the helicopter window, watching moonlight paint silver across waves that crashed against rocky shores. In the distance, she could make out the silhouette of a house. No, an estate, perched on cliffs that seemed to defy gravity. "Where are we?" she asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Somewhere no one will find us," Luca said. His voice carried a strange quality she hadn't heard before. Relief, maybe, or exhaustion finally catching up to him. "I bought this place 5 years ago. Vincent knows about it. 2 security personnel who stay in the guest house. That's it. No staff. No surveillance beyond the perimeter. No connections to anything I do in the city." The helicopter touched down on a private pad carved into the cliff face. When the rotors finally stilled, the silence was so complete it felt like stepping into another world. No sirens, no traffic, just wind and waves and the cry of seabirds Elena couldn't see in the darkness. Luca helped her down, his hand steady on her elbow as she found her footing on solid ground. The heels that had been perfect for a museum gala were dangerously impractical on the rough stone path leading to the house. "Here." He shrugged out of his tuxedo jacket, draping it over her shoulders against the ocean wind. "There are clothes inside, real clothes, not just things designed to impress society vultures." The house revealed itself in stages as they approached. Modern architecture that somehow felt organic, like it had grown from the cliffs rather than been built upon them. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the moon. The front door was heavy wood that looked centuries old, transplanted from some European monastery. Inside, the space was nothing like the sterile penthouse. This was lived in, warm. Books lined the walls, actual books, worn from reading. Comfortable furniture that invited you to sink in rather than perch carefully. Art that looked chosen for love rather than investment value. A stone fireplace large enough to stand in dominated one wall. "This is beautiful," Elena breathed, turning slowly to take it all in. "It's honest," Luca corrected. He moved through the space with familiar ease, lighting lamps that cast golden pools of warmth. Everything in the city is calculated, designed to project power or wealth or whatever image serves the moment. Here, nothing matters except what I actually want around me. He disappeared down a hallway, returning with clothes, soft yoga pants, a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than it looked like it did, thick socks. "Bathroom's second door on the left. Take your time." Elena changed quickly, grateful to shed the museum-perfect armor of her gala outfit. When she returned to the main room, she found Luca had built a fire and changed into jeans and a dark sweater. He looked younger somehow, more real. He'd poured 2 glasses of wine and stood at the windows, staring out at the restless ocean. "I don't know how to do this," he said without turning around. "Do what?" "Be honest with someone." He took a long drink. "My entire life is built on controlling information, showing only what serves my purpose, hiding everything that could be used against me." Elena joined him at the window, accepting the wine glass he offered. "Then start small. Tell me one true thing." Luca's laugh was harsh. "You want true? I've killed 3 men. Not ordered their deaths, actually killed them myself. 2 were self-defense, 1 wasn't." The admission hung between them like smoke. Elena's first instinct was to recoil, to remember exactly who she'd married. But something in his voice stopped her. This wasn't a boast. It was a confession. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked quietly. "Because you defended me tonight without knowing what you were defending." He finally looked at her, his dark eyes shadowed. "Because if we're doing this, actually trying to build something beyond a transaction, then you deserve to know what you're choosing." "And what am I choosing?" "A man who built an empire on violence and fear, who controls half the city's underground economy, who has more blood on his hands than you can imagine." Luca's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "I launder money through legitimate businesses. I move product that ruins lives. I make deals with people who would slit their own mother's throat for the right price." Elena took a slow sip of wine, buying time to think. Everything he was saying should terrify her, should send her running back to the helicopter, demanding to be taken back to the city, back to her safe ignorance. But she'd seen the way he looked at that piano, the book he'd left for her, the way he'd transformed tonight at the gala, not into someone fake, but into someone playing a role he was exhausted by. Tell me about the third man, she said, the one who wasn't self-defense. Luca turned back to the window. For a long moment, Elena thought he wouldn't answer. His name was Marcus Vega. He worked for me. Mid-level enforcer, good at his job. I found out he was skimming. Not much. A few thousand here and there, but in my world, theft is the ultimate betrayal. So you killed him. I had a choice. I could have demoted him, fired him. Hell, I could have just taken the money back and called it a lesson learned. Luca's reflection in the glass looked haunted. Instead, I put a bullet in his head in front of 20 of my men, because I needed them to see what happened to betrayal. I needed the fear. How long ago was this? 6 years. I was 26 years old, desperate to prove I wasn't weak, that I'd earned my position through more than just ruthlessness. He drained his wine glass. I think about Marcus Vega every single day. Wonder if his daughter still remembers him, if his wife found someone else, if I could have chosen differently. Elena set down her wine and moved closer to him, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the tight line of his jaw. Do you still make those kinds of choices? She asked. No. The word was immediate, certain. That night changed something in me. I realized fear makes you powerful, but it also makes you alone. Completely, utterly alone. Now I find other ways. Threats, usually. Economic pressure. I've built a reputation where most people don't test me because they know I'll destroy everything they've built. But you don't kill. Not unless there's no other option. And so far, there's always been another option. He finally turned to face her fully. Does any of this change how you see me? Elena thought about her father, dying in a hospital bed from a stroke brought on by stress from debt. Thought about the loan sharks who'd preyed on his desperation. Thought about all the ways the world crushed people who were just trying to survive. I think, she said carefully, that you've done terrible things. And I think you know they were terrible, which makes you different from people who do terrible things and sleep soundly. I think you're trying to be better than you were, even if the world you live in doesn't make that easy. That's a remarkably generous interpretation. I'm not finished. Elena held his gaze. I also think you're using this confession as a test, to see if I'll run, to prove to yourself that no one can know the real you and still choose to stay. Luca's expression shifted, surprise breaking through his carefully maintained control. And I'm not running. Elena surprised herself with the certainty in her voice. I signed a contract with you knowing exactly what your reputation was. You think I didn't know who Luca De Lorenzo was before Vincent showed up at that hospital? Everyone knows. They just don't say it out loud. Knowing about someone and knowing someone are different things. Then let me know you, Elena said. The real you. Not the crime lord, not the chess master moving pieces around the city. The man who plays piano at 3 a.m. and reads Jane Austen and built this house because he needed somewhere honest. Jane Eyre, Luca corrected automatically. Not Austen. You know what I mean. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I do. They stood there in the firelight, the ocean crashing against the cliffs outside, and something fundamental shifted between them. The walls weren't down, not entirely, but there was a door now, and it was opening. I'm starving, Luca said suddenly. When did we last eat? Elena laughed, the tension breaking. I had 3 canapes at the gala that tasted like expensive cardboard. Criminal. He headed toward what she assumed was the kitchen. I actually know how to cook. One of the skills you pick up when you grow up poor and hungry. Elena followed him into a kitchen that was somehow both state-of-the-art and comfortable. Luca moved through it with easy familiarity, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. Poor? She prompted, settling onto a bar stool to watch him work. South Brooklyn. My father was a dock worker when he could get the work. Drank when he couldn't, which was most of the time. Mother cleaned houses until she got sick. His hands moved efficiently, chopping vegetables with the precision of someone who'd learned young. I was 14 when she died. Cancer. No insurance, no treatment, just a slow, painful decline. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me that the system doesn't care about people like us. That if you want to survive, you have to make your own rules. He slid pasta into boiling water, started a sauce in a pan. I started running errands for the local crew. Nothing major, just carrying messages, keeping watch. But I was smart, and I paid attention. By 16, I was doing real work. By 20, I'd earned enough trust to start building my own operation. What happened to your father? Liver failure, died 6 months after my mother. Luca's voice was neutral, but Elena heard the old pain beneath it. He never knew what I'd become. Probably better that way. Elena watched him cook, this man who'd killed and built empires, and somehow still remembered how to make pasta sauce from scratch. You said I'm nobody. That's why you chose me. But you're wrong about one thing. What's that? I'm not nobody to my father, just like your mother wasn't nobody to you. She met his eyes across the kitchen. We're all somebody to someone. That's what makes us human. Luca stopped stirring, his attention fully on her. How did someone who served hash browns at a 24-hour diner get so damn perceptive? Same way someone who runs half the city's criminal enterprises learned to make carbonara. Life teaches you things. He laughed. A real laugh, not the calculated sound he'd used at the gala. Fair enough. They ate at the counter, the food simple and perfect. Elena couldn't remember the last time she'd had a meal that felt this comfortable, this real. Luca told her stories about growing up in Brooklyn, about the neighbor who taught him to read when he couldn't sit still in school, about stealing books from the library because he was too ashamed to get a card. Elena shared her own memories, her mother's last days, her father's quiet strength, the way she'd learned to disappear in crowds because being invisible felt safer than being seen. That's why you're so good at watching, Luca observed. I noticed it at the gala. You see everything, but nobody sees you. Survival skill. The best kind. He refilled their wine glasses. What did you want to be? Before your father got sick, before all of this, what was the dream? Elena had to think about it. The dream felt so distant now, like something from another lifetime. A teacher, I think, or maybe a librarian. Something with books and helping people learn. Nothing grand or ambitious, just useful. That's not nothing. Luca's voice was serious. The world needs people who want to help more than people who want to conquer. Says the man who built an empire. Empire's just another word for cage. The bigger it gets, the harder it is to escape. He stood, gathering their plates. Come on, I want to show you something. He led her through the house to a room she hadn't seen yet. When he opened the door, Elena gasped. It was a library. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined every wall, packed with books of every size and vintage. Leather armchairs invited reading. A window seat looked out over the ocean. The smell of old paper and binding glue hung in the air like incense. This is incredible, Elena breathed, moving deeper into the room. Her fingers trailed over spines. Classic literature, philosophy, poetry, history. How long did it take you to collect all of this? Still collecting. Every city I visit, every deal I close, I find a bookstore and pick something. Luca watched her explore with an expression she couldn't quite read. Books were my escape when I was young. The only way out of Brooklyn that didn't require money or connections. I could be anyone, go anywhere, as long as I had a library card. Elena pulled out a worn copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, its pages soft with reading. You've read this one a lot. Too many times. The revenge fantasy of a young man who felt the world had screwed him over. Luca took the book from her, handling it with surprising gentleness. I'm not that young man anymore, but I keep it as a reminder. Of what? That revenge is a poison you drink hoping the other person dies. He replaced the book carefully. That some cages are built from the inside. They stood close in the quiet library, the ocean a distant whisper through the windows. Elena was acutely aware of his presence. The heat of him, the way he seemed to take up more space than his physical form should allow. Why did you really bring me here? She asked softly. Luca's eyes met hers, dark and intense. Because for the first time in 3 years, I wanted someone to see me. Not De Lorenzo, the crime boss. Not the man at the gala in the perfect tuxedo. Just me. And what do you want me to see? That I'm tired. The admission seemed to cost him something. Tired of the violence and the schemes and the constant calculation. Tired of sleeping 3 hours a night because I can't shut my brain off. Tired of being alone in rooms full of people. Elena reached out, her hand finding his. His fingers closed around hers immediately, warm and solid. You're not alone right now, she said. No. His thumb traced circles on her palm, the touch electric. I'm not. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Luca's free hand came up to cup her face, his touch surprisingly gentle for hands that had done such violent things. Elena? Her name was a question, a request for permission. She answered by rising on her toes, closing the distance between them. The kiss was nothing like she'd expected, not aggressive or demanding. Instead, it was careful, searching, like he was learning her through touch, memorizing the shape of her lips, the taste of wine, and something uniquely her. Elena's hands found their way to his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palms. He pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her hair, the other spanning her lower back. The kiss deepened, heat building between them like the fire in the other room. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca rested his forehead against hers. That wasn't part of the contract, he said, voice rough. No, Elena agreed. It wasn't. We can stop here. Go back to the arrangement. Pretend this didn't happen. Elena pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. Is that what you want? What I want is complicated. His hands framed her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. What I want is dangerous. For you. For whatever safety I've tried to build around both of us. Then let me decide if I want to risk it. You don't know what you're risking. Then tell me. Elena covered his hands with hers. Stop protecting me from information and let me make my own choices. Luca stepped back, running his hands through his hair in frustration. The careful control he'd maintained all evening was cracking, showing the turbulence beneath. There are people who would love to use you against me, he said. Enemies who would see a wife as the perfect leverage. Right now you're safe because our marriage is clearly transactional. Nobody believes I care. The moment that changes, what? They come after me? Elena's voice was steady. Luca, they already could. I'm legally your wife. My name is on that marriage certificate. Whether you care about me or not, I'm already a target if someone wants to hurt you. That's different. That's you lying to yourself. She moved closer again, refusing to let him retreat. You brought me here because you wanted someone to see the real you. Well, I'm seeing you. All of you. The violence, and the empire, and the loneliness, and the man who makes pasta and collects books and plays piano when he can't sleep. And I'm choosing to stay. You don't know what you're saying. Stop telling me what I know. The words came out sharper than Elena intended, but she didn't take them back. I'm not some naive girl who stumbled into this blind. I knew who you were when I signed that contract. I know who you are now, and I'm still here. Luca stared at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Why? Because you're not the monster you think you are. Elena's voice gentled. Because in 2 weeks of living as strangers, you've shown me more consideration than anyone has in years. Because you left me a book when you didn't have to. Because you look at me like I'm real, not invisible. Because... She stopped, surprised by the words trying to force their way out. Because what? Luca prompted, his voice barely above a whisper. Because I think we could save each other, Elena finished, if we're brave enough to try. The silence that followed was broken only by the ocean and the crackle of the distant fire. Luca's expression cycled through emotions too quickly to name: hope, fear, longing, resistance. Finally, he pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest like she was something precious and breakable. I don't know how to do this, he admitted into her hair. How to be with someone without destroying them. Then we figure it out together. Elena wrapped her arms around him, feeling the tension in his shoulders gradually ease. No more separate wings, no more pretending, just us being honest with each other. Honest, he laughed softly. I've built my life on deception. Then it's time to try something new. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the library, surrounded by stories of other people's lives, other people's loves and losses and triumphs. Outside, the ocean kept its ancient rhythm, indifferent to human complications. Finally, Luca pulled back enough to look at her. There are things I can't tell you. Business things. Deals and operations that would put you in danger if you knew the details. I'm not asking for that. Elena met his gaze steadily. I'm asking for you. The person beneath all the strategy and survival. That person might disappoint you. Let me be the judge of that. A slow smile spread across Luca's face, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. It transformed him completely, erasing years of hard living and harder choices. You're dangerously stubborn, he said. Says the man who built an empire from nothing. Fair point. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Stay here tonight, not in a separate room, not pretending, just stay. Elena's heart stuttered in her chest. This was the real precipice, the moment that would change everything between them. Okay, she said simply. Relief washed over Luca's features. He led her through the house to the master bedroom, another space that felt lived in and real. The bed was enormous but comfortable looking. Windows overlooked the ocean. Books were stacked on the nightstand next to a reading lamp. I'll take the couch if you want, Luca started. Don't. Elena cut him off. We both know where this is going. Let's not pretend otherwise. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Bathroom's through there if you want to get ready for bed. There are spare toothbrushes, whatever you need. Elena took her time in the bathroom, her hands shaking slightly as she washed her face and brushed her teeth with one of the unopened toothbrushes she found in a drawer. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her eyes were brighter than they'd been in months. Her skin flushed. She looked alive in a way she hadn't since before her mother got sick. When she emerged, Luca had changed into sleep pants and a t-shirt. He stood by the window staring out at the darkness. Second thoughts? Elena asked. About 100 of them. He turned to face her. But not about wanting you here. They got into bed from opposite sides, the space between them charged with possibility. Elena could feel the heat of him, smell the clean scent of soap, and something uniquely him. Come here, Luca said softly. She moved into his arms, her head finding the hollow of his shoulder like it was made to fit there. His arms came around her, holding her close but not demanding. Tell me something else true, Elena murmured into the darkness. I haven't slept next to anyone in 3 years, Luca admitted. Not since Vivian. I forgot what it felt like to not be alone in the dark. What does it feel like? Terrifying. And perfect. His hand stroked her hair, the gesture soothing. Tell me something true. Elena thought about it. I used to pray my father would die quickly when he had his stroke. Not because I didn't love him, but because I couldn't stand watching him suffer. Then I felt so guilty for thinking it that I couldn't sleep for days. That's not something to feel guilty about. Luca's voice was gentle. Loving someone means wanting their pain to end, even if it means losing them. Have you ever loved anyone? The question hung in the air for a long moment. My mother, Luca finally said. And I thought I loved Vivian, but I think I just loved the idea of being normal, of having a life that didn't require looking over my shoulder. And now? Now I think love is more complicated than I understood when I was younger. His arms tightened around her fractionally. Now I think it's less about grand gestures, and more about choosing to trust someone with the parts of yourself you usually hide. Elena tilted her head to look up at him in the moonlight. Are you trusting me with those parts? I'm trying. His hand came up to cup her face. It's harder than building an empire. Scarier than any deal I've ever made. Good things usually are. He kissed her then, slow and deep and searching. Elena responded without hesitation, her hands sliding under his shirt to feel the warm skin beneath. She felt his heart racing, matching the rhythm of her own. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca pressed his forehead to hers. We should sleep, he said, though his voice suggested sleep was the last thing on his mind. We should, Elena agreed, making no move to put distance between them. They lay tangled together in the darkness, hands exploring with gentle curiosity rather than urgency. Learning the landscape of each other, the scar on his ribs from a knife fight, the birthmark on her shoulder blade, the way he shivered when she traced the column of his throat, the way she gasped when his fingers ghosted along her spine. It was intimate without being sexual, vulnerable without being overwhelming, building something fragile and new in the space between their separate lives. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both. Elena drifted off listening to Luca's heartbeat beneath her ear, his arms secure around her, his breathing evening out into sleep. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. She woke to early morning light painting the room gold and the smell of coffee. Luca sat on the edge of the bed, already dressed in jeans and a sweater, holding a mug and watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Morning, he said softly. Elena stretched, her borrowed clothes twisted from sleep. What time is it? Just past 6. I didn't want to wake you, but we need to talk. The serious tone sent a spike of anxiety through her. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but we can't stay here forever. Luca handed her the coffee mug. Vincent called. There's been movement in the city. Nothing immediately dangerous, but situations that need my attention. Elena sipped the coffee. Perfect. Exactly how she liked it, though she'd never told him. So we go back. We go back, he confirmed. But not to separate wings. Not to the contract as it was. What are you saying? I'm saying last night changed things. For me, at least. Luca's hand found hers. I'm saying I want to try this. Actually try. But you need to understand what that means in my world. Tell me. It means increased security. It means Vincent will assign bodyguards who will shadow you whenever you leave the penthouse. It means being more careful about where you go and who you talk to. His jaw tightened. It means accepting that there are people who will see our relationship as weakness and try to exploit it. And you think I can't handle that. I think you shouldn't have to. Luca's voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. You married me to save your father, not to become a target in gang wars and power struggles. Elena set down the coffee mug and took both his hands in hers. Luca, look at me. He met her eyes reluctantly. I'm already in this, she said firmly. The moment I signed that contract, I was in this. The only question is whether we face it alone or together, and I'd rather face it together. You say that now, I say that knowing exactly what I'm choosing. Elena cut him off. Stop trying to protect me from decisions I'm capable of making myself. I'm not Vivian. I'm not going to run when things get hard. You can't know that. Neither can you. She squeezed his hands. But we can choose to trust each other anyway. Isn't that what you said last night? That love is about trusting someone with the parts you usually hide? Luca's expression softened. Using my words against me, that's fighting dirty. I learned from the best. Elena smiled. So what do you say? Do we do this for real? All of it? He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. You're going to be the death of me. Or the saving of you. Could go either way. His laugh rumbled through his chest. Definitely the death of me. They held each other as the sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. Outside, the ocean crashed and retreated in its eternal rhythm. Inside, two people who'd started as strangers bound by contract took the first real steps toward something neither of them had planned for, something that felt dangerously close to love. The helicopter ride back to the city felt different than the journey out. Elena sat closer to Luca now, his hand wrapped around hers, their shoulders touching. The cityscape emerged through the morning haze like a promise and a threat simultaneously. All those millions of lives, all those competing interests, all the dangers that came with being seen as something more than a transaction. Vincent met them on the penthouse rooftop, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes sharp as they took in the subtle shift between his employer and the woman who'd been contract only 2 days ago. Sir, he said with a slight nod. Mrs. De Lorenzo? I trust the island was satisfactory. It was perfect, Elena said before Luca could respond. Something in her tone must have conveyed the change because Vincent's eyebrows rose fractionally. I see, he said carefully. Perhaps we should discuss the security arrangements then. They moved down to the penthouse proper. Elena noticed immediately that someone had been here. Her things had been moved from her wing into Luca's space. Her books on the nightstand next to his, her toiletries in the master bathroom. The physical evidence of separate lives had been erased while they were gone. I took the liberty, Vincent said, catching her noticing. Given your instructions before you left, sir. Luca shot him a look that suggested those instructions hadn't been quite so presumptuous, but didn't contradict him. Walk me through the situation. Vincent produced a tablet, pulling up what looked like surveillance footage and documents. 3 incidents in the last 36 hours. First, someone attempted to hack our financial systems. Professional job, likely state-sponsored based on the signature. They didn't get far, but the attempt itself is concerning. Who benefits from access to our books? Luca's tone had shifted. This was the crime lord, not the man who'd held Elena in the darkness and confessed his fears. Several parties, the feds, obviously, but also Dmitry Volkov's organization. They've been probing our operations for months, looking for weakness. Volkov. Luca's jaw tightened. What else? Second incident. A shipment was intercepted at the port. Clean interception, no violence, but someone knew exactly which container to hit and when it would arrive. Vincent swiped to another screen. Third incident is more personal. Someone's been asking questions about your wife. Elena felt ice slide down her spine. What kind of questions? Background checks, family history, financial records. Vincent's expression was apologetic. Nothing they couldn't get from public records, but the timing is suspicious. Someone's building a profile. Volkov again? Luca's voice was dangerously quiet. Most likely, he's old school, still believes family is the ultimate leverage. Vincent closed the tablet. I've already increased security. 2-man detail whenever Mrs. De Lorenzo leaves the building. Full background checks on anyone new in her orbit. Electronic countermeasures on all her devices. I don't need bodyguards to visit my father, Elena protested. You do now. Luca's tone left no room for argument. This is exactly what I warned you about. The moment our relationship became real, you became a target. I can handle... Elena. He turned to face her fully, and she saw the fear beneath his anger. Please, let me protect you. It's the only thing that will let me sleep at night. The raw honesty in his voice stopped her protest. She looked at Vincent, who maintained his neutral expression with professional excellence. Fine, she said, but they stay outside the hospital room. My father doesn't need armed guards scaring him if he wakes up. Agreed. Luca's relief was palpable. Vincent, who do you recommend? Marcus Chen and Sofia Rodriguez. Both former military, both discreet. They'll blend in better than some of our usual personnel. Vincent glanced at Elena. You won't even notice them most of the time. I doubt that, Elena muttered, but she didn't argue further. Vincent excused himself to make arrangements, leaving Elena and Luca alone in the penthouse that no longer felt like a cage of separate wings. I should check on my father, Elena said, suddenly uncomfortable with the intensity of Luca's gaze. I haven't been there in 2 days. I'll come with you. She blinked in surprise. You don't have to do that. I'm sure you have 1,000 things to deal with after being gone. They can wait. Luca moved closer, his hand cupping her face with familiar gentleness. Your father is important to you, which makes him important to me. And if I'm being honest, I'd like to meet the man who raised someone brave enough to marry a monster. You're not a monster. You keep saying that. I'm starting to wonder if you'll ever believe your own words. His smile was sad. But I appreciate the faith, even if it's misplaced. They took the car, the same Blacktown car, with the driver who looked more bodyguard than chauffeur. Elena watched the city slide past, familiar streets that suddenly felt different knowing someone out there was building a file on her, looking for weaknesses to exploit. Tell me about Volkov, she said quietly. Luca's expression hardened. Dmitry Volkov runs the Russian syndicate in the city. Old world mentality, very traditional, very brutal. He's been trying to expand his territory for years, and I'm one of the primary obstacles in his way. Why? Because I control the ports, and he needs access to move his operations. We've had an uneasy truce for the last 5 years, but truces don't last forever. Luca's hand found hers. He's also the kind of man who believes women and children are acceptable casualties in business disputes. Elena's blood ran cold. And you think he's behind the incidents Vincent mentioned? The pattern fits, testing our defenses, gathering intelligence, building towards something bigger. His jaw clenched, which is why you don't go anywhere without security. No arguments, no exceptions. What if he comes after my father? Your father has round-the-clock protection. 2 guards outside his room, 1 inside posing as medical staff. Volkov would have to go through an army to get to him. Luca's voice softened. I meant what I said in that contract, Elena. Your father's safety is guaranteed. That hasn't changed. The hospital loomed ahead, its familiar bulk somehow more ominous now that Elena understood the stakes. The driver pulled up to the entrance, and Elena noticed 2 people materialize from nowhere, a compact Asian man in his 30s and a woman with sharp eyes and an athlete's build. Mrs. De Lorenzo, the woman said with a slight nod. I'm Sofia. This is Marcus. We'll be accompanying you today. Just stay outside the room, Elena repeated. Please. Understood. They rode the elevator in silence. Elena noticed how Marcus and Sofia positioned themselves, always watching, always aware, their eyes cataloging everyone who got on or off. It should have felt oppressive, but instead she found it oddly comforting. Thomas Whitmore looked smaller than Elena remembered, his body diminished by weeks of medical intervention, but his color was better. The monitor showed stronger, steadier rhythms. The doctor had said his brain activity was improving, that there was hope he might wake up. "Hi, Dad," Elena said softly, taking his hand. "I brought someone to meet you." Luca stood awkwardly near the door, clearly uncomfortable in this space of illness and institutional care. Elena gestured him closer. "This is Luca," she said, knowing her father couldn't hear but needing to say it anyway. "My husband. He's the one who's been taking care of you, making sure you have the best doctors, the best treatment." "Sir?" Luca's voice was surprisingly gentle. "I know you can't hear me, but I want you to know your daughter is remarkable. Stronger than she thinks she is. Braver than anyone I've ever met." He paused, seeming to search for words. "She saved my life without even knowing it. I'm going to spend the rest of mine making sure she's safe and happy. You have my word." Elena's eyes burned with unshed tears. She squeezed her father's hand, then reached for Luca's, connecting the three of them in a chain of silent promises. They stayed for an hour, Elena reading to her father from the battered copy of Treasure Island he'd read to her as a child. Luca sat quietly in the corner, occasionally checking his phone, but mostly just watching. When they finally left, Elena felt lighter somehow, like introducing the two most important men in her life had sealed something fundamental. Marcus and Sophia fell into step behind them as they walked to the elevator. Elena was reaching for the call button when Sophia suddenly stepped between her and a doctor approaching from the side. "Keep walking," Sophia said quietly, her hand inside her jacket. The doctor stopped, raising his hand slowly. "I'm just trying to get to the elevator." "Hospital staff uses the service elevator on the east wing," Marcus said, his tone conversational but his posture combat-ready. "This floor is restricted access only." "I must have gotten turned around." "You must have." Luca's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Tell Volkov that if he wants to have a conversation, he should call like a civilized person. Sending scouts to a hospital is beneath even him." The fake doctor's expression flickered, just for a second, but long enough to confirm Luca's accusation. He backed away slowly, hand still raised, then turned and walked quickly toward the stairs. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "That was a test," Luca finished grimly, "seeing how tight our security is, how quickly we'd respond to a threat." He looked at Sophia and Marcus with approval. "Good work." "Should we pursue?" Marcus asked. "No, let him report back. Let Volkov know exactly what he's up against if he tries anything." Luca's hand pressed against Elena's back, guiding her into the elevator that had just arrived. "We're leaving, now!" The ride down was tense. Elena could feel Luca's controlled fury radiating off him in waves. Sophia spoke quietly into her phone, presumably alerting the rest of their security team. "This is what you meant," Elena said quietly, "about becoming a target." "This is just the beginning." Luca's voice was tight. "Volkov is escalating, testing boundaries. He'll keep pushing until he finds a weakness, or I push back hard enough to make him reconsider." "What does pushing back look like in your world?" Luca's expression was grim. "You don't want to know." But Elena did want to know, needed to know, if she was going to be part of this world. "Tell me." He looked at her for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "Vincent is already moving pieces. We'll hit 3 of Volkov's operations simultaneously. Nothing violent, just economic disruption. Shipments that mysteriously go missing, permits that get held up in bureaucratic red tape, employees who decide to work for better employers. And if that doesn't work, then it escalates." Luca's jaw was tight. "But I'm hoping Volkov is smart enough to recognize that a war would cost both of us more than either of us would gain." They reached the ground floor. The car was already waiting, driver alert, engine running. Marcus and Sophia did a sweep of the surrounding area before nodding the all clear. Elena slid into the back seat, Luca close behind her. As they pulled into traffic, she noticed how his hands were clenched into fists, knuckles white with tension. "Hey," she said softly, covering one of his hands with hers. "I'm okay. We're okay. This time." His voice was rough. "But what about next time? What if they'd been willing to escalate right there in the hospital? What if—" "Stop." Elena squeezed his hand. "You can't protect me from every possible threat. That's not realistic and it's not sustainable. We knew this would be dangerous. We chose it anyway." "I chose it. You just got dragged along." "I chose it too," Elena insisted. At the island, in bed last night. This morning when I told you I wanted to face this together. Stop trying to shoulder all of this alone. Luca pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her like he could physically shield her from the world. I don't know how to do this, how to be with someone and not destroy them in the process. Then we'll figure it out together. Elena tilted her head to look up at him. That's what partners do, right? Face the impossible and find a way through. Partners. He tested the word. Is that what we are? What else would you call it? I don't know. His hand stroked her hair absently. I've never had a real partner before. Business associates, employees, enemies. But someone who actually has my back with no ulterior motive? That's new territory. The car pulled up to the penthouse building. Marcus and Sophia performed another security sweep before allowing them to exit the vehicle. The ride up in the private elevator felt interminable, tension thick enough to cut. Inside the penthouse, Vincent was waiting with another man Elena didn't recognize, tall, scarred, with eyes that had seen too much violence and hadn't looked away. This is Jacob, Vincent said without preamble. Head of security for the Eastern operations. He has information about Volkov's movements. Jacob nodded respectfully to Luca, his gaze sliding over Elena with professional assessment. Sir, ma'am, we've confirmed Volkov is consolidating his forces. He's pulled in additional muscle from Brighton Beach and Newark. Whatever he's planning, it's big. Timeline? Luca's voice was clipped, all business. 48 to 72 hours, maybe less. Jacob pulled out his phone, showing a map with various locations marked. These are his known properties. We've got eyes on all of them, but he's being careful. Minimal communication, lots of movement, classic pre-operation behavior. He's going to hit us. Luca studied the map. The question is where? The ports are the obvious target, Vincent said, but obvious might be misdirection. He could be planning something at the financial operations. Or, he hesitated, glancing at Elena. Or something personal. Luca finished, his expression darkening. He's done this before, 5 years ago, when I first started challenging his territory. Went after my accountant's family to send a message. Elena felt cold spread through her chest. What happened? I made it very clear that targeting civilians would result in mutually assured destruction. Luca's voice was flat. He backed off, but that was before I had actual family, before there was someone he could leverage. So what do we do? Elena asked, hating how small her voice sounded. We move you somewhere safe, Luca said immediately. The island, or maybe the safe house in... No, Elena cut him off. Absolutely not. I'm not running and hiding while you face this alone. Elena, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. She stood, squaring her shoulders. You think moving me makes me safer? It just makes me an isolated target. Here, I have security. I have you. I'm not going anywhere. Luca looked at Vincent and Jacob. Give us a minute. They left without a word, closing the door behind them. Luca turned to Elena, frustration and fear warring in his expression. You don't understand what you're asking, he said. If Volkov decides to escalate, this penthouse could become a war zone. Then we make sure he doesn't get that chance. Elena moved closer. You said you wanted a partner. Partners don't hide while the other fights. They stand together. Even if standing together gets you killed? Even then, Elena's voice was steady. Because I'd rather die fighting beside you than live in a cage somewhere knowing you're facing this alone. Luca stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're insane. Probably. Elena allowed herself a small smile. But so are you. We match. Despite everything, he laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound that held equal parts disbelief and admiration. You're going to drive me out of my mind. That's the plan, Elena sobered. But seriously, Luca, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But sending me away doesn't solve the problem. It just delays it. Volkov knows I exist now. He knows I matter to you. That doesn't change whether I'm here or on the island or in Siberia. I hate that you're right. Get used to it. I'm right a lot. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough that she could feel his heart racing. If we do this, if you stay, you follow every security protocol. No arguments, no exceptions. You listen to Sophia and Marcus like your life depends on it, because it does. Deal. Elena pulled back to look at him. Now call Vincent and Jacob back in. If we're planning for war, I want to know the strategy. Luca studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. Vincent and Jacob returned, both professional enough not to comment on the discussion they'd clearly heard through the door. They spread out maps and documents on the dining table, transforming the elegant space into a war room. Our best defense is to appear unified and unshakable, Vincent said. Volkov needs to believe that coming after Mrs. De Lorenzo would be suicide, not just for his organization, but for him personally. So we make a show of strength, Luca said. Public appearances. Visible security. Make it clear she's untouchable. Exactly. Jacob pointed to several locations on the map. We also need to shore up our defenses at key locations, the ports, obviously, the financial operations, and this building. This building is already a fortress, Luca said. We make it more of one. Jacob's expression was grim. Weapons cache on this floor. Panic room with independent communications. Evacuation routes that don't rely on the main elevator. If they come here, we need to be ready for anything. Elena listened to them plan, trying to absorb the reality of what her life had become. 2 weeks ago, her biggest worry was whether she could pick up an extra shift at the diner. Now she was sitting in a penthouse planning for potential assault by Russian mobsters. What about my father? She asked during a lull in the planning. Already secured, Vincent assured her. The hospital has been notified that Mr. Whitmore is under federal protection. We have friends who can make that official if needed. Volkov would have to go through multiple layers of security to get anywhere near him. And if he does? Then he'll discover that we have people in the hospital who are very good at their jobs. Vincent's tone was mild, but Elena caught the steel beneath it. Your father is safe, Mrs. De Lorenzo. I give you my word. The planning continued for another 2 hours. Elena contributed where she could, asking questions that the men seemed to appreciate. Luca kept glancing at her like he expected her to bolt at any moment, but she remained steady, absorbing information and making mental notes. Finally, Jacob and Vincent left to begin implementing their strategies. Elena and Luca were alone again in the penthouse that had been transformed from a home into a fortress. You should eat something, Luca said, moving toward the kitchen. It's been hours since breakfast. I'm not hungry. You need to keep your strength up. He started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. And cooking gives me something to do with my hands instead of breaking things. Elena watched him work, recognizing the controlled violence in his movements. He was terrified, she realized. Beneath the planning and the strategy and the cold competence, he was absolutely terrified of losing her. Luca, she said softly. Don't. He didn't turn around. If you tell me again that you're not going anywhere, I might actually lose it. I was going to say that I love you. His hands stilled on the cutting board. The silence stretched so long that Elena wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe it was too soon. Maybe he didn't feel the same way. Maybe... Luca turned to face her, his expression raw and vulnerable. You can't love me. You barely know me. I know enough. Elena stood, crossing to him. I know you play piano when you can't sleep. I know you read Jane Eyre because you understand what it means to want more than what the world offers. I know you make pasta from scratch and collect books and built a house on an island because you needed somewhere honest. That's not enough to build love on. I also know you're terrified right now, that you'd burn down the world to keep me safe, that you're trying so hard to be better than what the world made you. Elena's hand found his chest, feeling his racing heart. I know that when you hold me, I feel like I finally matter to someone, like I'm not invisible anymore. You were never invisible. His voice was rough. You just thought you were. And you showed me different. Elena rose on her toes, her lips close to his. So yes, maybe it's too soon. Maybe I'm crazy, but I love you anyway. You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. Luca's hands came up to frame her face, his touch achingly gentle. I don't know if what I feel is love. I don't know if I'm capable of that anymore. If I ever was. Okay. But I know that the thought of losing you makes it hard to breathe, that I'd do anything, destroy anyone to keep you safe. His forehead pressed against hers. That for the first time in years, I wake up looking forward to the day instead of dreading it. Is that love? I think it might be. Then I love you too. The words seemed torn from somewhere deep inside him. And it terrifies me more than Volkov or any of this ever could. Elena kissed him, pouring everything she felt into the contact: love and fear and determination and hope. He responded with equal intensity, his hands tangling in her hair, his body pressing against hers like he could merge them into one unbreakable unit. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca rested his forehead against hers. "If we survive this," he said, "I'm taking you back to the island and not leaving for a month." "If we survive this," Elena corrected, "we're going back to the island and figuring out what our actual life looks like. Not contract marriage, not transaction. Real life." Real life. He tested the words like they were foreign. "I'm not sure I know what that looks like." "Then we'll learn together." They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other as the sun set over the city and shadows lengthened across the floor. Outside, somewhere in those millions of lights, Dmitry Volkov was planning his move, gathering his forces, testing their defenses. But inside the penthouse, two people who'd started as strangers held on to each other and chose hope over fear. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The next morning arrived too quickly. Elena woke to find Luca already gone from bed, voices drifting from the main room. She pulled on clothes and emerged to find the penthouse full of people: Vincent, Jacob, Sophia, Marcus, and several others she didn't recognize. "Situation?" Luca was asking, his tone clipped. "Volkov moved last night," Jacob reported. "Hit 3 of our peripheral operations. A gambling house, 2 front businesses. No casualties, but significant property damage. Classic escalation pattern. He's sending a message." Luca's expression was carved from stone, showing he can reach us whenever he wants. "There's more." Vincent looked grim. "We intercepted communication suggesting he's planning something for tonight. Location unclear, but it's personal. He specifically mentioned your wife." Every eye in the room turned to Elena. She fought the urge to step back, to hide, to become invisible again. "What kind of personal?" Luca's voice was dangerously quiet. "Unknown, but he's pulling in specialists, extraction team probably." Vincent's jaw was tight. "Sir, we need to move Mrs. De Lorenzo. Now, before he has a chance to—" "No." Elena cut him off, her voice steadier than she felt. "We talked about this. Moving me just makes me an easier target." "Elena," Luca started. "We make our stand here," she continued, cutting him off too. "Together. Let him come. Let him see exactly what happens when he threatens your family." The word family hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Luca stared at her, and she saw the moment he made his decision. "Jacob, fortify this floor. Weapons, ammunition, everything. Vincent, pull everyone we trust in tight. If Volkov wants war, we'll give him one he'll never forget." His hand found Elena's, gripping tight. "But we do this smart. No unnecessary casualties. We're not monsters." "Speak for yourself," Jacob muttered, but he was already moving, barking orders into his phone. The penthouse transformed over the next few hours. What had been a home became a stronghold. Armed personnel stationed at strategic points. Windows reinforced. Escape routes verified. Elena watched it all, trying not to think about what it meant that such preparations were necessary. Sophia appeared at her elbow. "Mrs. De Lorenzo, I need you to come with me." She led Elena to a room that had been converted into an armory. Weapons lined the walls, everything from handguns to rifles to things Elena couldn't even name. "I know you've never handled a gun," Sophia said, pulling down a compact pistol. "But you need to learn, just in case." "Just in case what?" "Just in case everything else fails." Sophia's expression was serious. "I don't say this to scare you, but if they get through all of us, you need to be able to protect yourself." Elena stared at the weapon Sophia held out to her, remembering the night she'd arrived at the penthouse. The gun Luca had pressed into her hands with instructions to shoot first. She'd thought it was metaphorical then. Now she understood it had been preparation. "Show me," she said, taking the gun with hands that only trembled slightly. Sophia spent the next hour teaching her the basics: how to load, aim, fire, how to handle the recoil, how to move and shoot simultaneously. Elena absorbed it all, forcing down her fear and focusing on survival. "You're a natural," Sophia said with approval. "Steady hands, good focus. With training, you could be excellent at this." "I'd rather never need to use it." "We all would." Sophia's smile was sad. But the world doesn't care what we'd rather. It just is what it is. Our job is to survive it. When they emerged from the armory, the sun was setting. Golden light painted the city in shades of amber and blood. Elena found Luca standing at the windows, staring out at the approaching darkness. "It's almost time," he said without turning. "How do you know?" "I can feel it." He finally looked at her, and his eyes were ancient with accumulated violence. "This is what I tried to protect you from. This is what I am when the mask comes off." Elena moved to stand beside him, their reflections ghost-like in the darkening glass. "Then show me. All of it. No more holding back." "You might not like what you see. That's my risk to take." He pulled her close, his arms fierce around her. "When this starts, you stay with Sophia and Marcus. No matter what happens, you don't leave this floor unless they clear it. Promise me." "I promise." "And if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you." "Elena," his voice was firm. "If something happens to me, Vincent has instructions. You'll be taken care of, protected. The contract terms will be honored, plus more. You and your father will want for nothing." Tears burned her eyes. "I don't want your money. I want you. And I want you to survive." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "So promise me. If I go down, you run. You don't look back. You take the life I bought you and you live it fully." "Luca, promise me." "I promise," Elena whispered, knowing it was a lie. Knowing she could never run if he fell. Knowing they were in this until the end, whatever that end might be. Jacob appeared in the doorway. "Sir, they're moving. Multiple vehicles heading this way. ETA, 10 minutes. Luca's expression transformed. The vulnerable man disappeared, replaced by something harder, colder. The crime lord who'd built an empire on calculated violence. "Positions," he ordered. "No one fires until my signal. We give them a chance to back down. But if they don't," his smile was sharp as broken glass, "then we remind Dmitry Volkov exactly why I own this city." The minutes crawled past like hours. Elena stood in the designated safe room, a reinforced interior space with no windows and a door that could withstand a battering ram. Sophia and Marcus flanked her, both armed and alert, their eyes fixed on the multiple monitor screens showing different angles of the building's approaches. Through the slightly open door, Elena could see Luca in the main room, phone pressed to his ear as he coordinated with Vincent. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, but she'd learned to read the tension in his shoulders, the tight line of his jaw. He was a coiled spring waiting to release. "3 vehicles just pulled into the underground garage," Jacob's voice crackled through the comms. "Black SUVs, tinted windows. They're not trying to hide." "Let them come up," Luca said calmly. "I want to see what Volkov thinks he can accomplish with a frontal assault on my home." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. They should be evacuating, calling the police, doing anything except standing here waiting for armed men to reach their floor. "The police," she started, "are already paid to look the other way," Sophia said quietly. "This is how things work in this world, Mrs. De Lorenzo. When men like your husband and Volkov have disagreements, official channels don't apply. That's madness. That's power." Marcus's eyes never left the monitors. "Real power exists in the spaces between laws. Your husband understands that better than most." The elevator chimed. Elena watched on the monitors as the doors slid open to reveal 6 men in tactical gear, weapons drawn. But they didn't storm out shooting. Instead, they formed a corridor, and through their ranks walked a man Elena had never seen but instantly recognized. Dmitry Volkov was in his late 50s, silver-haired and distinguished-looking in an expensive suit. He could have been a banker or a diplomat. Only his eyes gave him away, cold and calculating, the eyes of a man who'd ordered deaths the way other people ordered coffee. "De Lorenzo!" His voice boomed through the space, heavily accented. "I know you can hear me. Come out and let us talk like civilized men." Luca appeared from around the corner, moving with deceptive casualness. He'd removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, making it clear he wasn't armed, wasn't afraid. "Volkov," he said evenly, "this is an unexpected visit. I don't recall inviting you to my home." "Your home?" Volkov smiled, and it was the smile of a shark. "Yes, I have heard you have made quite the nest for yourself here, and recently acquired a little bird to keep you company. Every muscle in Elena's body tensed. Sophia's hand moved to her weapon. "My wife is none of your concern," Luca said, his tone dropping 20 degrees. "Ah, but she is. You see, when a man in our profession takes a wife, it becomes everyone's concern. It shows weakness, vulnerability." Volkov began to circle slowly, his men moving with him in perfect formation. "I remember when you were young and hungry, Luca, when you understood that family was a liability we could not afford. I remember when you had a wife too, Dmitri, before she decided life in Moscow was preferable to life with you." Volkov's smile vanished. "You would do well not to bring up painful subjects. Then perhaps you should extend me the same courtesy." The two men stared at each other across the penthouse, decades of rivalry and grudging respect charging the air between them. Elena realized she was holding her breath. "I did not come here for war," Volkov said finally. "I came to make you an offer." "I'm listening." "Step aside from the port operations. Give me access to terminals 7 through 12. In exchange, I leave your pretty little wife alone. I even throw in a bonus, protection for your father-in-law, old man in a hospital, so vulnerable. It would be a shame if something happened." The threat was delivered with the casual malice of a man accustomed to getting his way through fear. Elena felt ice slide down her spine. Luca's expression didn't change, but Elena saw his hands flex, the only sign of the fury building beneath his controlled exterior. "No," he said simply. "No?" Volkov's eyebrows rose. "You would risk your wife's life for business?" "I would risk everything before I let you threaten what's mine." Luca took a step forward, and despite being outnumbered and outgunned, he somehow seemed more dangerous than all of Volkov's men combined. "You made a mistake coming here, Dmitri. You showed your hand. You admitted my wife matters enough to use as leverage, which means you've run out of better options. I have 6 armed men, and I have 15 positioned throughout this building, all of whom have you in their sights right now." Luca's smile was cold. "You really think I'd let you walk into my home without preparations? Every man you brought is currently targeted by at least 2 of mine. You pull a trigger, you die. They pull triggers, they die. Is that really how you want this to end?" Volkov's confidence flickered. His eyes darted around the penthouse, searching for the threats he couldn't see. "You're bluffing." "Jakob," Luca said calmly, "would you please demonstrate for our guest?" 3 red laser dots appeared on Volkov's chest, then 3 more on the men flanking him. The Russians tensed, fingers tightening on triggers. "One word from me and this room becomes a slaughterhouse," Luca continued, his voice conversational. "Your men might get a few shots off, but you won't live to see the results. Is that what you want? To die in my penthouse over port access?" The silence stretched taut as a wire. Elena could see the calculation in Volkov's eyes, weighing odds and outcomes, pride against survival. "This is not over," Volkov said finally. "Oh, but it is." Luca's voice hardened. "Because now we establish new terms. You leave my wife alone. You leave her father alone. You stop testing my operations, and you accept that some territory is not negotiable. In exchange, I won't dismantle your entire organization piece by piece. You threaten me in front of my men? I'm stating facts in front of witnesses." Luca's smile was sharp. "You came here thinking love made me weak, but you're wrong, Dmitri. Love makes me absolutely merciless, because now I have something worth protecting, which means I have something worth destroying everything for." Volkov's jaw clenched. Elena could see the fury in his eyes, the humiliation of being outmaneuvered in what should have been his power play. "We had a truce," he said. "We still do, as long as you respect its boundaries." Luca gestured toward the elevator. "Now get out of my home, and tell whoever sent you here that threatening my family is a line no one crosses twice." "Whoever sent me?" Volkov's expression shifted, confusion replacing anger. "No one sent me. I came because you have been interfering with my operations for months. The port access, the financial pressure, the employees who mysteriously decide to work elsewhere." Now it was Luca's turn to look confused. "What are you talking about? I haven't touched your operations since our last agreement." "Then explain the 3 shipments that disappeared last month. The warehouse fire in Queens. The federal raids that somehow only hit my properties." Elena watched the 2 crime lords stare at each other, both clearly reassessing the situation. "Someone's playing up," Luca said slowly. "Apparently so." Volkov's eyes narrowed. "Someone who benefits from us going to war with each other." "Who?" If I knew that, I would not be standing here. Volkov glanced at his men, then back to Luka. Perhaps we should talk. Really talk. Without weapons and threats. Luka considered for a long moment, then nodded. Jakob, stand down. Everyone, hold positions but do not engage. He looked at Volkov. Your men stay here. You and I talk in private. Acceptable. The two men disappeared into Luka's study, leaving their respective forces in tense standoff. Elena watched on the monitors, wishing she could hear what they were saying. This is unexpected, Sophia murmured. Is it good or bad? Elena asked. Honestly, I don't know. Marcus frowned at the screens. If they're both being manipulated, that changes everything. But if Volkov is lying, using this as a distraction, they waited. Minutes ticked past. The Russian soldiers shifted uncomfortably, acutely aware they were still being targeted. Jacob appeared in the main room, speaking quietly to his team, clearly as confused as everyone else. Finally, the study door opened. Luka and Volkov emerged, their expressions grim. We have a problem, Luka announced. A mutual problem. He gestured, and everyone gathered in the main room, Russians and Luka's people eyeing each other warily, but holding fire. For the last 3 months, Luka continued, both our organizations have been hit by what appeared to be attacks from the other. Shipments intercepted, properties damaged, operations disrupted. We both assumed the other had broken our truce. But neither of us actually did, Volkov finished, which means someone else has been orchestrating this conflict. Someone who wants us to destroy each other. Who benefits? Jacob asked. That's what we need to figure out. Luka pulled out his phone, bringing up documents. Vincent, are you seeing this? Already on it, sir. Vincent's voice came through the speakers. Cross-referencing incidents, looking for patterns. Elena's mind raced. Someone powerful enough to manipulate both organizations. Someone with access to intelligence on both sides. Someone who would benefit from the city's 2 largest crime families going to war. Senator Hargrove, she said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. Sophia started to tell her to stay quiet, but Luka raised a hand. What about him? He asked. At the gala. He was probing you, remember? Asking questions. And you said he's under federal investigation for campaign finance violations. Elena's thoughts crystallized as she spoke. What if he's trying to create chaos? Use the conflict between you to cover his own tracks or gain leverage? Volkov's eyes sharpened. The senator has approached me as well, 3 times in the last 2 months, offering deals, asking for favors. I assumed he was simply corrupt. He is corrupt, Luka said. But Elena might be right. Vincent, pull everything we have on Hargrove. Financial records, communications, associates. Already doing it. And sir, you're going to want to see this. Vincent's tone was urgent. I've got communications between Hargrove and a private security firm. They've been running operations that match the timeline of your incidents perfectly. Send it to my phone. Luka scanned the documents, his expression growing darker with each swipe. He showed the screen to Volkov, who cursed in Russian. This bastard has been playing us like puppets, Volkov growled, using our conflict to distract from his own criminal activities. And when we destroy each other, he swoops in to fill the power vacuum. Not if we stop him first, Luka said. He looked at Volkov directly. Temporary alliance. We deal with Hargrove together. Then we go back to our respective territories and maintain our truce. Agreed? Volkov extended his hand. Agreed. But after this, we renegotiate the port situation. Properly. Fine, Luka shook his hand. But it happens at a negotiating table, not with guns. Fair enough. Elena watched this surreal alliance form. 2 men who'd been enemies minutes ago now united against a common threat. It was like watching tectonic plates shift. What's the play? Jacob asked. Hargrove is hosting a fundraiser tomorrow night, Vincent said through the speakers. Private event at his estate in the Hamptons. Very exclusive, very secure. Then we crash it, Luka said. But not with violence. We need evidence that stands up in court. Real evidence that the feds can't ignore. I have contacts in the federal prosecutor's office, Volkov offered. People who would be very interested in a senator orchestrating gang violence for political gain. And I have tech people who can get us into his systems, Luka added. If we can get physical access to his home network, we can pull everything he's ever done. They planned quickly, the former enemies working together with the efficiency of longtime partners. Elena watched in fascination as Luka and Volkov divided responsibilities, assigned personnel, coordinated timing. This was what real power looked like. Not violence, but the ability to adapt and strategize under pressure. Mrs. De Lorenzo, Volkov said suddenly, turning to her. I owe you an apology. I came here tonight intending to use you as leverage. That was dishonorable. Elena blinked, surprised. Thank you? Your husband is a lucky man. Not many women would face down armed intruders with such composure. He smiled, and for the first time it looked genuine. In another life, perhaps we could have been friends. In another life, perhaps you wouldn't be a crime lord. Volkov laughed, a booming sound that filled the penthouse. I like her, De Lorenzo. She has spine. That she does, Luka agreed, pride evident in his voice. The Russians left shortly after. The immediate threat dissolved into an uneasy alliance. Once they were gone, Luka's people began standing down, the tension finally breaking. Sophia appeared at Elena's side. You can come out now, Mrs. De Lorenzo. It's safe. Elena emerged from the safe room on shaking legs. The adrenaline that had kept her upright was fading, leaving her weak and trembling. Luka was there immediately, pulling her into his arms. You okay? He asked quietly. I don't know. Elena's voice shook. That was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced, and nothing even happened. Welcome to my world. He kissed her forehead. But you were brilliant. That connection to Hargrove. I wouldn't have made it without you. Really? Really? He pulled back to look at her. You see things differently than we do. We're so used to thinking about direct threats that we miss the indirect ones. You saw the bigger picture. Jacob approached, his expression serious. Sir, we need to talk about tomorrow night. If we're infiltrating Hargrove's estate, we need a solid plan. His security will be top tier. Agreed. Luka looked at Elena. This conversation is going to get technical and probably boring. You should rest. I want to hear it, Elena said firmly. I'm not going to hide while you plan something dangerous. Elena, partners, remember? We face things together. She met his eyes. Besides, you might need someone who sees the bigger picture. Luka smiled despite the tension. Fair enough. But you're eating something first. You haven't had food since breakfast. He was right. Elena's stomach was growling. While Jacob and Vincent set up the planning materials, Luka made her a sandwich with the same efficient movements he'd used at the island. It was such a normal domestic action in the middle of all this chaos that Elena almost laughed. They gathered around the dining table, now covered in blueprints of Hargrove's estate, security schedules, and technical diagrams. The fundraiser starts at 7, Vincent explained. Guest list is about 200 people, politicians, donors, society types. Security will be heavy, but designed to be subtle. They won't want to make the guests uncomfortable. So we go in as guests, Luka said. We'd need an invitation. Hargrove's people vet everyone. I can get us an invitation. Volkov's voice came through the conference line. I have a business associate who is invited. He owes me favors. What about the tech infiltration? Jacob asked. His home office is on the second floor, northeast corner. Vincent pulled up detailed schematics. That's where he'll keep his personal server. We need someone inside who can access it for at least 15 minutes to clone the drives. I can do that, a new voice said. Elena looked up to see a young woman in her 20s, dressed in all black with bright purple hair. Sorry I'm late, traffic was murder. Elena, this is Reina, Luka introduced. Our tech specialist. If it has a circuit board, she can hack it. Or build it, or break it, or make it do things its makers never intended, Reina added cheerfully. Heard we're taking down a corrupt senator. I love my job. Can you get into his system? Vincent asked. Please. I've gotten into systems with 10 times better security than some rich politician's home network. Reina pulled out a laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Give me building specs and I can map the network infrastructure. Once I know where the servers are, getting in is just a matter of physical access. Which is where you come in, Jacob said to Luka. You and Mrs. De Lorenzo attend the fundraiser as legitimate guests. You create a distraction while Reina slips upstairs and does her thing. What kind of distraction? Elena asked. The best kind. You be yourselves. Vincent smiled slightly. A powerful couple showing unity at a social event. People will be fascinated, especially after the drama at the museum gala. While everyone's watching you, Reina gets to work. It could work, Luka said thoughtfully. But it's risky. If Hargrove suspects anything, then we have bigger problems than a crashed fundraiser, Jacob finished. But the risk is worth it. This evidence could end him. They planned for hours, working through contingencies and backup plans. Elena absorbed it all, occasionally offering observations that made the men pause and reconsider their approaches. She was learning to think like them, seeing angles and opportunities where before she'd only seen chaos. By the time they finished, it was nearly 3 a.m. Reyna had left to prepare her equipment. Jacob and Vincent had departed to coordinate with their respective teams. Even Volkov had signed off the conference line, promising to have the invitation delivered by morning. Elena and Luca were alone again in the penthouse, the silence almost shocking after hours of intense planning. "You should sleep," Luca said, though he made no move toward the bedroom. "So should you." "I'm too wired. Every time I close my eyes, I see how badly tonight could have gone." He pulled her close. If Volkov had decided to shoot first and talk later, but he didn't, we're okay. This time. His arms tightened around her. Tomorrow night is going to be even more dangerous. At Hargrove's estate, we'll be on his territory. If things go wrong, then we adapt, like we did tonight. Elena pulled back to look at him. "You can't protect me from every possible danger, Luca. All you can do is trust that I'm strong enough to face what comes." "I do trust you. It's the world I don't trust." "Then let's change the world, one corrupt senator at a time." He laughed, the sound tired but genuine. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple, but it's necessary." Elena took his hand, leading him toward the bedroom. "Now come on. We both need rest if we're going to pull off a heist tomorrow night." "It's not technically a heist. We're breaking into someone's home to steal data. It's absolutely a heist." Elena smiled. "My first heist. Should I add that to my resume?" "Please don't." They got ready for bed in comfortable silence, the domestic routine soothing after the chaos. When they finally lay down, Elena curled into Luca's side, listening to his heartbeat gradually slow. "I meant what I said earlier," she murmured into the darkness. "I love you." "I love you too." His hand stroked her hair. "Even though loving you terrifies me." "Good terrified or bad terrified?" "I don't think there's a good kind of terrified." He paused. "But if there was, this would be it." Elena smiled against his chest. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we take down a senator." "Tomorrow we take down a senator," he agreed. Sleep claimed them both, tangled together in the massive bed. Two people who'd found something worth fighting for in each other. Outside, the city lights glittered like scattered diamonds, indifferent to the drama playing out 70 floors above the streets. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. Elena spent the morning with Sophia, going over the layout of Hargrove's estate until she could navigate it blindfolded. The afternoon was consumed by wardrobe selection. They needed to look wealthy and important enough to belong at an exclusive fundraiser, but not so flashy as to draw excessive attention. The dress they settled on was emerald green silk, elegant and understated. The sapphire ring Luca had given her at their courthouse wedding would serve as her only jewelry. Simple. Classy. The kind of outfit that suggested old money rather than new. Luca wore a midnight blue suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a spy film. Professional. Dangerous. Absolutely at home in the world of wealth and power. "We look good," Elena said, studying their reflection in the mirror. "We look like targets," Luca corrected, but his smile softened the words. "Which is exactly what we need. Every eye on us means no eyes on Reyna." They took a helicopter to the Hamptons, faster and less predictable than driving. Volkov's invitation had arrived that morning via courier, perfectly forged and impossible to distinguish from the real thing. Hargrove's estate sprawled across 20 acres of prime beachfront property. The main house was a modern monstrosity of glass and steel, all sharp angles and expensive materials. Cars lined the circular drive, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, the occasional Ferrari. Old money and new, united in their desire to curry favor with a man who could make or break political careers. "Remember the plan," Luca said as their car joined the queue. "We're here to be seen, smile, make small talk, let people wonder about the crime lord and his mysterious wife. Reyna does the rest. Where is she?" "Already inside. Came in with the catering staff 2 hours ago." Luca squeezed her hand. "She knows what she's doing. We just need to give her time." They stepped out of the car into a warm evening, the ocean breeze carrying the scent of salt and money. A string quartet played Mozart on the terrace. Waiters circulated with champagne and canapes. Everything was perfectly choreographed to project wealth and taste. Senator Hargrove himself stood near the entrance, greeting guests with the practiced charm of a career politician. His smile faltered slightly when he saw Luca and Elena approaching. "Mr. De Lorenzo," he said, recovering quickly. "What an unexpected pleasure. I wasn't aware you'd been invited." "I have friends everywhere, Senator." Luca's smile was sharp. "You remember my wife, Elena." "Of course. Mrs. De Lorenzo, you look lovely." Hargrove's eyes swept over her with barely concealed calculation. "I hope you're enjoying married life." "Very much," Elena said smoothly. "Luca takes excellent care of me." "I'm sure he does." Hargrove's attention shifted back to Luca. "Perhaps we could speak privately later. I have a business proposition that might interest you." "I'm sure you do, but tonight I'm here purely for pleasure." Luca guided Elena past the senator before he could respond. "Enjoy your party, Richard." They moved into the crowd, accepting champagne from a passing waiter. Elena sipped carefully, needing to stay sharp. "That was bold," she murmured. "He needed to know we're not afraid of him." Luca's eyes scanned the room, cataloging faces and positions. "And now everyone here knows we came to his event uninvited. The gossip mill will keep them busy for hours." He was right. Elena could feel the stares, hear the whispered speculation. The notorious Luca De Lorenzo crashing a senator's fundraiser with his new wife. It was exactly the kind of scandal high society loved. "Mrs. De Lorenzo!" A familiar voice made Elena's blood run cold. Vivian Ashford materialized from the crowd, resplendent in red silk and spiked. "How unexpected to see you here! Does the senator know he's hosting criminals?" "Vivian." Luca's tone could have frozen nitrogen. "Still bitter, I see." "Not bitter, concerned." Vivian's smile was venomous. "About what your little wife has gotten herself into. Does she know about the bodies, Luca? The people who've disappeared because they crossed you?" Elena felt every eye turned toward them. This was a test, she realized. Vivian was trying to crack their united front in the most public way possible. "I know exactly who I married," Elena said clearly, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet terrace. "And unlike some people, I don't run when things get complicated. I stay. I fight. I choose my partner every single day." The silence that followed was absolute. Vivian's perfect mask cracked, fury blazing in her eyes. "You have no idea what you've chosen," she hissed. "Then that's my mistake to make." Elena met her gaze steadily. "But at least I'm brave enough to make it." Luca's hand found the small of Elena's back, a gesture of solidarity and pride. "We should circulate. Enjoy your evening, Vivian." They moved away, leaving Vivian standing alone in her expensive dress and her expensive anger. Around them, conversation gradually resumed, but Elena could feel the shift. They'd made a statement, united, unshakable, dangerous to oppose. "That was magnificent," Luca murmured in her ear. "I'm tired of people thinking I'm weak just because I'm not violent." "You're the strongest person I know." He kissed her temple, a public display of affection that would fuel gossip for weeks. And everyone here just learned that lesson. They worked the room for the next hour, playing their parts perfectly. The crime lord and his wife, utterly comfortable in high society, impervious to judgment. People approached cautiously, drawn by curiosity and repelled by fear. Elena's earpiece, disguised as an elegant pearl, courtesy of Reina's technical genius, crackled to life. "I'm in," Reina's voice whispered. "Starting the data clone now. Need 12 minutes. Elena touched her necklace once. The signal they'd agreed on. Luca saw the gesture and nodded imperceptibly. 12 minutes, he murmured. Time to really put on a show. He led her to the dance floor where couples swayed to the quartet's music. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and they moved together with the ease of long practice, despite having never danced before. "Everyone's watching," Elena whispered. "Good. Let them watch." Luca's hand splayed across her lower back. "Let them see that I am exactly where I want to be." The music swelled around them, violins and cellos weaving melody and harmony. Other couples drifted away, giving them space, unable to look away from the spectacle of Luca De Lorenzo, feared crime lord, looking at his wife like she was the only person in the world. 8 minutes, Reina's voice said in Elena's ear. Senator Hargrove appeared at the edge of the dance floor, his expression troubled. He was watching them too closely, Elena realized, seeing too much. "We have a problem," she murmured to Luca. "I see it." Hargrove was moving toward them, his Secret Service detail following. If he interrupted now, started asking questions, it could blow Reina's cover. "Follow my lead," Luca said. Before Elena could ask what he meant, he spun her dramatically, then dipped her low. The move was so unexpected, so perfectly executed, that applause broke out around them. When he pulled her upright again, his lips were inches from hers. "Trust me," he whispered. Then he kissed her. It wasn't the gentle, exploring kisses they'd shared in private. This was a statement, a claim, a declaration to everyone watching that Elena Whitmore, now Elena De Lorenzo, belonged to him and he to her, and anyone who tried to come between them would face consequences. The applause grew louder, people cheered, and most importantly, Senator Hargrove stopped advancing, a look of disgust crossing his face before he turned away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the quartet had stopped playing. The entire party was watching them. "Well," Luca said conversationally, "that certainly made an impression." 5 minutes, Reina's voice said, slightly amused. They continued dancing as the music resumed, acutely aware they were the evening's entertainment. But Elena didn't care. Let them watch. Let them gossip. It was all part of the plan. "Clone complete," Reina finally said. "Extracting now. 2 minutes, and I'm clear." Those 2 minutes felt like hours. Elena smiled and swayed in Luca's arms, maintaining their cover while her heart raced. So close. They were so close. "I'm out," Reina's voice was triumphant. "Package secured. See you at the rendezvous." Elena touched her necklace twice. Mission accomplished. Luca's arms tightened around her briefly, the only sign of his relief. "Time to make our exit," he said. They thanked the senator, who looked relieved to see them leaving, and made their way to the car. Only when they were safely inside, pulling away from the estate, did Elena allow herself to breathe. "We did it," she said wonderingly. "You did it." Luca pulled her close. That scene with Vivian keeping Hargrove distracted, maintaining cover even when every instinct probably screamed to run. "You were perfect." "We were perfect," Elena corrected. "Partners, remember?" "Partners," he agreed, kissing her forehead. The helicopter was waiting at a private field 20 minutes away. Reina was already aboard, her laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard. "This is beautiful," she breathed as they lifted off. "The senator has been very, very bad. Financial fraud, bribery, evidence tampering. And oh, look at this, communications with that private security firm detailing exactly how they've been manipulating you and Volkov into conflict." "Can you decrypt everything?" Luca asked. "Already done. This guy used his daughter's birthday as his password. Amateur hour." Reina's smile was fierce. "I'm packaging everything now. By morning, this can be in the hands of federal prosecutors, the FBI, and about a dozen major news outlets." "Do it," Luca said. They flew back to the city in triumph, watching the lights grow closer. Elena leaned against Luca's shoulder, exhausted but exhilarated. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now Hargrove's world falls apart. The evidence will trigger investigations that will take down half of Washington's corrupt elite." Luca's voice held satisfaction. "And Volkov and I return to our respective territories with our truce intact." "And us?" He turned to look at her, his expression soft in the helicopter's dim lighting. "Us? We figure out what comes next. Together." The penthouse felt like home when they finally returned. Vincent was waiting with updates. Volkov's people had confirmed receipt of the data, federal prosecutors were already reviewing the evidence, and media outlets were preparing stories that would break by morning. "You've ended his career," Vincent said with satisfaction. "By this time tomorrow, Senator Hargrove will be facing criminal charges." "Good," Luca said simply. "That's one less corrupt official using our world for his personal gain." After Vincent left, Elena and Luca stood at the windows, watching the city that had tried to destroy them and failed. "I keep thinking about what you said," Elena murmured. "About love making you absolutely merciless. Do you think I was wrong?" "No, I think you were right." She turned to face him. "I would burn down the world for you too. That's terrifying and wonderful at the same time." Luca pulled her close, his arms secure around her. "Then we're both absolutely merciless. God help anyone who tries to come between us." "No one will. Elena said with certainty. We've proven that. They stood there as dawn began to paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Two people who'd started as strangers bound by contract and become something far more dangerous. A partnership forged in fire. A love tested by violence and conspiracy. A marriage that was finally, truly real. The morning news confirmed what they already knew. Senator Richard Hargrove's face dominated every channel, accompanied by words like corruption, conspiracy, and criminal charges. Federal agents had raided his estate at dawn, emerging with boxes of evidence that would take months to fully process. The private security firm he'd used to orchestrate the gang violence had already begun turning on each other, each operative racing to cut deals with prosecutors. Elena watched from the penthouse windows as the city woke to the scandal. Beside her, Luca held a cup of coffee, his expression satisfied but not triumphant. This wasn't about victory, she realized. It was about justice. Vincent called, he said quietly. Volkov wants to meet. Neutral ground. Just the two of us to finalize terms. Is it safe? Safe as anything in our world ever is. Luca set down his coffee and turned to face her. But this is important. We need to solidify the truce properly, establish real boundaries. Otherwise, we're just delaying the next conflict. When? This afternoon, the old waterfront warehouse on Pier 17. Public enough that neither of us can try anything stupid, private enough that we can speak freely. He took her hands in his. I want you to come with me. Elena blinked in surprise. You want me at a mob negotiation? I want my partner at a business meeting. Luca's smile was slight but genuine. You saw the bigger picture with Hargrove. You might see things Volkov and I miss because we're too close to our own territory disputes. Or I might make things worse. You won't. His certainty was absolute. You have a way of cutting through the bullshit and finding the truth. That's exactly what we need. 3 hours later, they stood in the cavernous space of an old shipping warehouse. Sunlight streamed through broken windows, painting geometric patterns on the concrete floor. The smell of salt water and rust hung in the air, a reminder that this city had been built on trade and compromise long before crime lords carved it into territories. Dmitry Volkov arrived precisely on time, accompanied only by his right-hand man, Victor. The Russian looked different in daylight, older, more tired, less like a movie villain and more like a businessman who'd made questionable choices. De Lorenzo, he greeted. Mrs. De Lorenzo, thank you for coming. Dmitri. Luca gestured to a makeshift table someone had set up, probably Vincent, always thinking ahead. Shall we? They sat across from each other, Elena beside Luca, Victor beside Volkov. For a long moment, the two crime lords simply studied each other, decades of rivalry and respect passing between them in silence. We were both played, Volkov said finally. That is not something I will forget, or forgive. Agreed. Hargrove used us like chess pieces. Luca's jaw tightened. But the bigger question is why we let him. Why we were so ready to believe the worst of each other. Because trust is expensive in our profession, and we have never given each other reason to afford it. Then maybe it's time we did. Luca leaned forward. We've been fighting over the same territory for years, but this city is big enough for both of us if we're smart about divisions. Volkov's eyebrows rose. You're proposing what exactly? Partnership? I'm proposing we stop bleeding resources fighting each other and start actually building something sustainable. Luca pulled out a map of the city, various territories marked in different colors. You keep the eastern ports and expand into legitimate shipping operations. I maintain the western ports and focus on financial services. We split the neutral zones down the middle and agree to arbitration if disputes arise. And who arbitrates? We find a third party, someone with no stake in our operations but enough power that neither of us would dare cross them. Luca's expression was serious. This only works if we both commit to actually honoring the terms. Elena watched Volkov consider the proposal. She could see the calculation in his eyes, weighing risks against rewards, pride against pragmatism. There is still the matter of your interference in my operations over the last 3 years, Volkov said. The employees you poached, the permits you blocked. You have cost me millions. And you've cost me the same with your territorial encroachments and supplier intimidation. Luca's voice remained level. We can spend the next decade tallying grievances, or we can wipe the slate clean and start fresh. Just like that? Forget years of conflict? Not forget, learn from. Luca glanced at Elena, and she saw something in his expression that made her heart ache. I've recently discovered that holding on to old wounds only poisons the future. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose to move forward. Volkov followed Luka's gaze to Elena, understanding dawning in his eyes. Ah, love has made you philosophical. Love has made me recognize what actually matters. Luka's hand found Elena's under the table, their fingers lacing together. Building something that lasts matters more than winning temporary battles. You have changed, De Lorenzo. Volkov leaned back in his chair. The young man who took over the Western territories would never have proposed compromise. That young man was too angry and too scared to see beyond the next fight. Luka's voice softened. I don't want to be him anymore. The silence that followed was heavy with significance. Elena held her breath, waiting for Volkov's decision. Everything hinged on this moment, whether two men who'd been enemies could choose a different path. I accept your proposal, Volkov said finally. With one addition. My granddaughter is graduating from university next year. She wants to work in international shipping, legitimate shipping. I would like her to apprentice with your operations, learn the business properly. Luka blinked, clearly not having expected this. You want to trust me with your granddaughter? I want to invest in this truce with something that matters to me personally. If our agreement means enough that I would place family in your care, then we both have incentive to honor it. Volkov's expression was serious. And if you betray that trust, I will burn your empire to ash and salt the earth where it stood. Fair enough? Luka extended his hand. We have a deal. They shook, the gesture formal and binding. Elena felt tension she didn't know she'd been carrying release from her shoulders. This was it. The war that never quite happened was officially over. There is one more matter, Volkov said. The person who orchestrated all this. Hargrove. He is facing federal charges, but that is not enough. What are you proposing? Nothing violent, but I know people in the media. People who can ensure his trial becomes a public spectacle. Every corrupt deal, every life he damaged in his quest for power, it should all be exposed. Volkov's smile was cold. He wanted to use us for his political games. Let him become the cautionary tale instead. I have media contacts too, Luka agreed. Between us, we can make sure Hargrove never holds power again. Even if he somehow avoids prison, he'll be too toxic for any political comeback. Then we are in agreement on all points. Volkov stood, Victor rising with him. I will have my lawyers draw up formal documents. Nothing that could be used in court, of course, but enough to make our terms clear. Vincent will coordinate with them. Luka stood as well, Elena beside him. Thank you, Dmitri, for being willing to try something different. Thank your wife, Volkov nodded to Elena. She is the one who saw through Hargrove's manipulation. Without her, we might have destroyed each other by now. She has a way of seeing what others miss, Luka agreed, pride evident in his voice. After Volkov and Victor left, Elena and Luka stood alone in the warehouse, sunlight and shadows painting them in shades of gold and gray. That went better than expected, Elena said. You were right about bringing you. Luka pulled her into his arms. Having you there changed the whole dynamic, made it less about two crime lords posturing and more about actually solving a problem. All I did was sit there. You represented something neither Volkov nor I have had in a long time. Hope. The possibility that we could be more than what we've been. He kissed her forehead. You make me want to build instead of destroy. Then let's build something. Elena pulled back to look at him. Not just a truce with Volkov, an actual life, the one we talked about at the island. What would that look like? Elena thought about it, watching dust motes dance in the streams of sunlight. It looks like you slowly transitioning your operations into legitimate businesses. It looks like me finishing my degree, maybe becoming that teacher I dreamed about. It looks like visiting my father when he wakes up and being able to tell him his daughter is happy. When he wakes up, Luka repeated. You're sure he will? The doctors are optimistic. His brain activity is improving every day. Elena's voice caught slightly. I want him to know you, Luka. The real you. Not the reputation or the empire, just the man who plays piano and reads classic literature and makes the best pasta carbonara I've ever tasted. That man is only possible because you believed he existed. Luka's hand cupped her face. I've spent my whole adult life building walls and defenses. You walked in and demolished them without even trying. I tried a little bit. He laughed, the sound echoing in the empty warehouse. True, you're stubborn as hell. I learned from the best. They drove back to the penthouse in comfortable silence, Elena's head resting on Luca's shoulder. The city streamed past the windows, millions of lives intersecting in that uniquely urban way. Somewhere in this sprawl, Senator Hargrove was watching his career implode. Somewhere, Dmitry Volkov was telling his granddaughter about the apprenticeship opportunity. Somewhere, Vincent was already coordinating with lawyers and media contacts to ensure the truce held. And in a hospital room across town, Thomas Whitmore's brain was slowly knitting itself back together, unaware that his daughter had found something worth fighting for. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity. Hargrove's trial became the media circus Volkov had promised, every corrupt detail exposed under relentless public scrutiny. The senator's allies abandoned him en masse, politicians scrambling to distance themselves from the scandal. The private security firm folded under federal investigation, its operators competing to provide the most damning testimony against their former employer. Luca and Volkov's truce held. The formal documents were signed, territories divided, neutral arbitrators identified. Elena watched as Luca began the slow process of legitimizing his operations, selling off the illegal ventures, investing in legal businesses, transforming himself from crime lord to businessman. It was gradual, carefully managed, but the direction was clear. "It'll take years," he admitted one evening as they reviewed another stack of legal documents. "Maybe decades. Some of what I've built can't ever be fully legitimate, but I can make sure the majority of my empire is clean, something I can be proud of instead of something I have to hide." "I'm proud of you already," Elena said. "For what?" "I've killed people, destroyed lives, built everything I have on violence and fear." "And now you're choosing to be better." Elena set down the documents and moved to sit beside him. "That takes more courage than maintaining the status quo. You're literally dismantling the empire you spent years building because you want to be someone worthy of the life we're creating together." "I want to be someone your father can respect when he wakes up." "He will!" Elena's certainty was absolute. "Because he'll see what I see. A man who makes hard choices and lives with the consequences, who protects the people he loves, who's brave enough to change when change is necessary." Luca pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. "How did I get so lucky?" "You married a broke waitress to cover a debt." Elena smiled against his shoulder. "Not exactly traditional luck." "Best decision I ever made." They sat like that for a long time, watching the city lights flicker on as night fell. These quiet moments had become Elena's favorite, when Luca's walls were completely down, when they could just be two people who loved each other without the weight of empires and expectations. The call came 3 weeks after the warehouse meeting. Elena was having breakfast. Luca was on a conference call with his lawyers when her phone lit up with the hospital's number. Her hands shook as she answered. "Hello? Mrs. De Lorenzo? This is Dr. Martinez. I'm calling about your father." A pause that felt like an eternity. "He's awake." Elena's world tilted. "He's what?" "He regained consciousness about an hour ago. He's confused and weak, but responsive. His cognitive function appears intact, though we'll need to run more tests." "Doctor." Martinez's voice was warm with genuine happiness. "Would you like to come see him?" "Yes. Yes, I'll be there as soon as I can." She ended the call, staring at the phone like it might disappear. Luca appeared in the doorway, his conference clearly abandoned. "What happened?" "My father." Elena's voice broke. "He's awake. He's actually awake." Luca crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. "That's incredible. Do you want to go now?" "Yes, but I'm terrified." Elena pulled back to look at him. "What if he hates that I married you? What if he thinks I sold myself to pay his debts?" "Then we explain. We tell him the truth, that it started as a transaction but became something real." Luca's hand cupped her face. "And if he still hates me, I'll spend however long it takes earning his respect, because you're worth it." They arrived at the hospital 20 minutes later, Sophia and Marcus trailing at a discreet distance. Elena's heart hammered as she approached her father's room. Through the window, she could see him propped up in bed, looking impossibly small and fragile, but undeniably alive and aware. "You can do this," Luca said softly. Elena nodded and pushed open the door. Thomas Whitmore's eyes, the same warm brown as his daughter's, focused on her immediately. Recognition flared, followed by confusion, then joy so pure it made Elena's chest ache. "Elena?" His voice was rough from disuse, barely above a whisper. Dad. She was across the room in an instant, taking his hand carefully, mindful of all the tubes and wires still attached to him. You're awake. You're really awake. How long? He managed. Almost 2 months. You had a massive stroke. The doctors weren't sure you'd ever... She couldn't finish the sentence. But you did. You came back. Thomas's gaze shifted past her to where Luca stood near the door, trying to make himself unobtrusive. Who? Elena took a deep breath. This was it. The moment of truth. Dad, this is Luca De Lorenzo. He's my husband. She watched the information process across her father's face. Confusion, surprise, then something that might have been concern. Husband? Thomas's grip tightened on her hand. When? While you were unconscious. I know this is a lot to take in, but there's so much I need to tell you. Elena glanced back at Luca, who gave her an encouraging nod. When you had your stroke, I found out about the loan, the debt you'd taken on for Mom's treatment. Pain flickered across Thomas's face. I'm sorry. Should have told you. Was trying to handle it myself. I know, Dad, and I'm not angry, but the debt was called in, and I couldn't pay it. I was going to lose everything. She squeezed his hand gently. Luca offered me a way out, a marriage contract in exchange for clearing the debt and paying for your medical care. Thomas's eyes went to Luca again, this time with the sharp assessment of a father evaluating the man who'd married his daughter under questionable circumstances. Come here, he said, his voice gaining strength. Let me see you. Luca approached the bed, his movements careful and respectful. Mr. Whitmore, it's an honor to finally meet you. Your daughter has told me so much about you. You married my daughter for a debt. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. Initially, that was the arrangement. Luca didn't flinch from Thomas's scrutiny, but it became something more. Something neither of us expected. What's that supposed to mean? It means I fell in love with her. Luca's voice was steady, honest. I know my reputation. I know what people say about me. Most of it is probably true. But what Elena and I have built together is real. And I would do anything, give up everything to keep her safe and happy. Thomas studied him for a long moment, and Elena held her breath. Her father had always been a good judge of character. He'd see through any deception, any attempt to manipulate. Elena, Thomas said finally, still looking at Luca. Do you love him? Yes, Dad. I do. Elena moved to stand beside Luca, their hands finding each other automatically. I know this isn't what you would have chosen for me, but he's a good man underneath everything else. He's been taking care of you, making sure you had the best doctors, the best treatment. He gave me back my life when I thought I'd lost everything. And what has he asked for in return? Nothing I wasn't willing to give. Elena met her father's eyes. He's not using me, Dad. If anything, I think I'm saving him. Thomas's expression softened slightly. He looked between them, his daughter and the crime lord she'd married, and Elena saw the moment he made his decision. Help me sit up, Mortz, he said. Luca moved immediately, adjusting the bed controls and pillows with surprising gentleness. When Thomas was more upright, he gestured for them both to sit. I'm not going to pretend I'm happy about this, Thomas said carefully. My daughter married to someone like you. But I'm also not stupid. I know what that debt meant, what it would have done to Elena if it hadn't been resolved. I'm sorry you had to carry that burden, Luca said quietly. Your wife's illness, the impossible choices you faced. No one should have to choose between saving someone they love and financial ruin. But we do. Every day people make those choices. Thomas's gaze sharpened. The question is what we do with the consequences. You solved Elena's immediate problem. But what happens now? What kind of life can you give her? Whatever kind she wants. Luca's hand tightened on Elena's. I'm in the process of legitimizing my business operations. It'll take time, but I'm committed to building something legal, something I don't have to hide from her or from you. And if you can't, if some things can't be made legitimate, then I walk away from them. Elena is more important than any empire. Luca's voice was firm. I spent my whole life building power and control, but she taught me that none of it matters if you're alone. I choose her. Every time I choose her. Thomas looked at his daughter. Is this what you want? really want, not just accepting because you feel obligated. This is what I want, Elena said without hesitation. Luca isn't perfect. Neither am I. But we're building something real together, something that makes both of us better than we were alone. Her father was quiet for a long time, his eyes moving between them. Elena could practically see him weighing everything, his daughter's happiness against his concerns, the reality of their situation against his hopes for her future. I need you to promise me something, Thomas said finally, looking at Luca. Promise me that if you ever put my daughter in danger, real danger, not just the general danger of your profession, you'll do the right thing. You'll let her go. You'll make sure she's safe even if it costs you everything. I promise, Luca said immediately, though I hope it never comes to that. So do I. Thomas extended his hand, the gesture weak but meaningful. Take care of her, and help me understand this world you've pulled her into. If she's going to be part of it, I want to know what she's facing. Luca shook his hand carefully. I'll tell you everything. No secrets, no sugarcoating. You deserve to know the truth. They spent the next 2 hours talking. Elena watched as Luca explained his operations with brutal honesty, not hiding the violence or moral complexity. Thomas listened, asked pointed questions, and gradually began to understand the man his daughter had married. It wasn't acceptance exactly, but it was the beginning of something, understanding maybe. The recognition that Luca was trying to be better than his past. When they finally left, Thomas was exhausted but smiling. Bring him back, he told Elena. I want to know more about this man who's apparently worth risking everything for. I will, Dad. Elena kissed his forehead. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. And Elena? He squeezed her hand weakly. I'm glad you're happy. That's all I ever wanted for you. In the car back to the penthouse, Elena leaned against Luca's shoulder, emotions overwhelming her. That went better than I expected, she said. Your father is a remarkable man. He loves you enough to try to understand rather than just condemn. Luca's arm came around her. I meant what I said. I'll spend as long as it takes earning his respect. You're already on your way. Elena tilted her head to look at him. He saw how you look at me, how we are together. That matters more than words. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm. Elena visited her father daily, watching him grow stronger as rehabilitation restored his mobility and strength. Luca often came with her, and the two men developed a cautious rapport built on honest conversation and mutual respect for Elena. Volkov's granddaughter Natasha started her apprenticeship with Luca's shipping operations. She was brilliant and ambitious, and her presence served as a daily reminder of the truce that was holding. Elena sometimes had lunch with her, enjoying the younger woman's fresh perspective on the business world. The legitimate transformation of Luca's empire continued. Some operations were sold off, others were restructured and cleaned. It was slow, painstaking work, but progress was undeniable. And through it all, Elena and Luca grew closer. The contract that had brought them together became irrelevant, a piece of paper that no longer defined what they were to each other. 6 months after her father woke up, Elena stood in the bedroom of the island house, the place where everything had truly begun between them. Luca had brought her back here to celebrate Thomas's release from the hospital, fully recovered, moving into a beautiful assisted living facility that Luca had quietly arranged and paid for. I have something for you, Luca said, emerging from the closet with a small box. Elena's heart stuttered. Luca, it's not what you think. Well, not entirely. He sat beside her on the bed, opening the box. Inside was a ring, not the massive diamond he'd tossed at her that first night, but something more personal. A sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds, elegant and understated. Our first wedding was a transaction, Luca said quietly. Paperwork and cold efficiency. I want to do it again, properly this time. With your father there, with the people who matter, with vows that actually mean something. We're already married, Elena whispered. Legally, yes, but I want to marry you for real, not because of debt or contracts or arrangements. He took her hand, sliding the ring onto her finger beside the original one. I want to stand in front of everyone we love and promise to choose you every single day for the rest of my life. Will you marry me again, Elena? Tears streamed down her face. Yes, yes, of course, yes. He kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were smiling. When? Elena asked. Whenever you want. Here on the island, in the city, anywhere. You choose. Here. Elena looked around the room where they'd first confessed their fears and hopes to each other. This is where we became real. This is where we should make it official. They planned the wedding for early spring, when the island would be green and alive. It was small, just 50 people, carefully chosen. Thomas walked Elena down a makeshift aisle on the cliff overlooking the ocean, his strength fully returned. Vincent stood as Luca's best man, pride evident in his usually neutral expression. Sophia was Elena's maid of honor, the fierce bodyguard surprisingly emotional. Even Dmitry Volkov attended, sitting in the back with Natasha, his presence a symbol of the peace they'd all fought for. The ceremony was simple. No cold courthouse this time, but an actual officiant who spoke about love and commitment and choosing each other through difficulty. When it came time for vows, Luca took Elena's hands in his. I was dead before I met you, he said, his voice carrying over the sound of waves. Not literally, but in every way that mattered. I'd built walls so high that I couldn't see the sky anymore. You climbed those walls without hesitation, without fear, and showed me that there was life beyond survival. You taught me that being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's the bravest thing anyone can do. I promise to choose you every day, to be honest with you even when it's hard, to build a life with you that's worthy of the faith you've shown in me. I love you, Elena, not because of what you've given me, but because of who you are. Elena's voice shook as she spoke her own vows. I was invisible before I met you. I'd learned to disappear, to not take up space, to not matter. You saw me when no one else did. You made me feel like I was worth something more than just survival. You're not the monster you think you are, Luca. You're a man who's made hard choices and lived with the consequences. A man who's brave enough to change when change is necessary. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to be your partner in building something better, to love you not despite your past, but because your past made you who you are. I choose you, today and always. When they kissed as husband and wife, for real this time, not just on paper, the small gathering erupted in applause. Elena could see her father crying happy tears, could see Vincent allowing himself a rare smile, could see Volkov nodding in approval. The reception lasted until dawn, music and laughter filling the island house. Thomas danced with his daughter, both of them crying and laughing. Luca and Volkov had a long conversation that ended with the Russian clapping him on the shoulder in what might have been friendship. As the sun rose over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Elena and Luca stood at the cliff's edge where they'd first admitted their fears to each other. We did it, Elena said softly. We're still doing it. Luca pulled her close. Building something that lasts, something real. What happens next? Next, we live. His smile was peaceful in a way Elena had never seen before. We finish legitimizing the business. We watch your father enjoy his retirement. We build a life that's about more than just surviving. What about children? Elena asked, surprising herself with the question. Luca's eyes widened. Children? Eventually. Not now, but someday. She looked up at him. I want to build a family with you, a real one. Kids who grow up knowing they're loved, who don't have to fight for everything like we did. I would like that. His voice was thick with emotion. More than I can say. They stood there as the sun climbed higher, the island waking around them. In the house behind them, their friends and family were beginning to stir, ready for breakfast and more celebration. But in this moment, it was just the two of them. A crime lord learning to be a better man. A woman who'd been invisible learning she was extraordinary. Two people who'd started as strangers, bound by a contract signed in desperation, and became something neither had thought possible. A partnership forged in fire. A love tested by violence and conspiracy. A marriage that had transformed from transaction to truth. 6 months later, Elena stood in the classroom of a small community college, teaching Introduction to Literature to 20 eager students. Luca had quietly funded her return to school, and she'd completed her degree with honors. Teaching felt right. Helping others discover the worlds that books could open, just like reading had saved both her and Luca in their different ways. Her phone buzzed during a break. A text from Luca. Your father wants to know if we're free for dinner Sunday. He's apparently learned to make lasagna and wants to show off. Elena smiled, typing back. Tell him yes, but warn him your carbonara set a high bar. Already did. He says competition makes everyone better. She could picture the scene, her father and her husband bantering in the kitchen, the easy friendship that had developed between them. Thomas had fully recovered, living independently again, but with enough support that Elena didn't worry constantly. He'd even started volunteering at the hospital, talking to other stroke patients about recovery and hope. Luca's transformation was equally remarkable. 60% of his operations were now fully legitimate. The remaining 40% were being phased out carefully, transferred to people Luca trusted to run them less violently. He'd started a foundation providing interest-free loans to small businesses in underserved communities, his way of fighting against the kind of predatory lending that had trapped Thomas. The truce with Volkov had evolved into something resembling actual partnership. They occasionally collaborated on legitimate ventures, their combined resources and connections opening doors neither could access alone. Natasha had thrived in her apprenticeship and was now running her own division. Senator Hargrove had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His political career was obliterated, his name synonymous with corruption. The private security firm had been dissolved, its operators either imprisoned or testifying against their former employers. That evening, Elena came home to find Luca at the piano, playing the same haunting melody he'd played the first time she'd discovered him at 3 a.m. She stood in the doorway, just watching and listening. He looked up, his fingers never stopping their movement across the keys. How was class? Good. We started The Great Gatsby today. Half the students think it's a love story. The other half think it's a tragedy. Can it be both? That's what I told them. Elena moved to sit beside him on the piano bench. Play the song you were working on. The new one. Luca shifted into a different melody, something he'd been composing over the last few weeks. It was lighter than his usual choices, hopeful rather than haunted. It's beautiful, Elena said when he finished. What's it called? I was thinking of calling it Elena. His smile was slightly self-conscious. Too cheesy? Perfect amount of cheesy. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I have news. Good news or bad news? Depends on your perspective. She took a breath, heart racing. I'm pregnant. Luca's hands froze on the keys. The silence stretched so long that Elena started to worry. Luca? He turned to look at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Are you sure? Took 3 tests, all positive. I have a doctor's appointment next week to confirm, but yes, I'm sure. We're having a baby. He said it like he was testing the words, trying to make them real. An actual baby. Are you okay? I know we said eventually, but I didn't think it would happen so soon, and if you're not ready... He kissed her, cutting off her rambling. When he pulled back, he was smiling so widely it looked like it might hurt. I'm terrified, he admitted, and thrilled, and completely unprepared. But mostly I'm grateful that I get to do this with you, that we get to bring someone into the world and love them the way we should have been loved. We're going to make so many mistakes, Elena said. Probably, but we'll make them together, and we'll figure it out. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. This kid is going to have everything we didn't: safety, love, the freedom to be whoever they want to be. No pressure to join the family business? What family business? By the time they're old enough to ask questions, I plan to be completely legitimate. Just a boring businessman with boring investments. Luca's expression turned serious. I want them to be proud of me, not scared of me. They will be. Elena covered his hand with hers. Because they'll know the truth, that their father was brave enough to change, to build something better. They sat there at the piano as the sun set, imagining the future. A child learning to play this same instrument, family dinners with Thomas, teaching their son or daughter to read, passing on the love of stories that had saved both their lives. The penthouse that had once felt like a prison now felt like home. The contract that had brought them together had been shredded and burned, its terms irrelevant. What they had now was built on choice, not obligation, on love, not transaction. Elena thought about the night she'd signed that contract in the hospital, desperate and terrified and alone. If someone had told her then that she'd end up here, married for real, carrying Luca's child, building a life that felt like something from a dream, she never would have believed them. But life was strange that way. The most impossible things sometimes turned out to be the most true. I love you, Luca said quietly, his hand still resting on her stomach where their child was growing. I love you too. Elena turned to kiss him, soft and sweet and full of promise. Thank you. For what? For seeing me when I was invisible. For choosing to be better, for building this life with me. She smiled against his lips. For everything. I should be thanking you. His arms came around her, holding her close. You saved my life, Elena, in every way that matters. They stayed like that as night fell over the city, two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk toward the light together. Outside, the city that had tried to destroy them continued its relentless rhythm, but inside the penthouse, in each other's arms, they'd built something that violence and conspiracy couldn't touch. A love that started as a contract signed in desperation. A partnership forged in fire and fear. A marriage that became real through honesty and choice and the courage to believe in something better. No more separate wings. No more pretending. No more contracts defining their worth to each other. Just two people, choosing each other every day. Building a future together. Creating a family born from love instead of obligation. The marriage that began with ink and silence had been rewritten in hope and promise, and this time the ending was theirs to write.